Hello? Hello? The host asked me to speak.
Do you want to make an announcement for meeting just a minute for that lady?
So we are waiting for one other person to get here, so we'll wait a couple of more minutes and give her time to get here for some awards for our road and bridge guys. So. How's our technical?
We are getting.
Who's technical? Hey, we got our third one.
Oh, yeah. When she's here unloading, she's.
Okay, she's bringing her stuff. Okay.
I mean, if you want, we can. Prayer and that's.
We can go ahead and do that. Okay, it is 9:01 and it's time for our Tuesday morning business meeting. And at this time, we will have Josh Williamson do our invocation.
Join with me as we take a moment to pause and pray, to quiet our hearts and our minds, seeking an understanding that is beyond ourselves and the constant rush of our lives. God, we ask that all would come to know peace. Remind us today and each day that prayer is the greatest defense against the affliction of despair and hopelessness. Or that we wield that privilege often and with compassion and wisdom. We ask that you unite the people of this meeting, town, county, state, nation, world. May this sense of shared space help us feel connected and give us a new desire to be gardeners and caretakers of our here and now. In the sure and certain hope that in our asking you will answer, we pray in the strength of your eternal name. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you, wherever he may send you in your decision making. May he guide you through the wilderness, protect you through the storms of ambiguity. May he bring you through this meeting with rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you in common agreement. And may he close the meeting with much rejoicing, giving a sense of peace that justice has been given and a sense of accomplishment and working together in the service of the people. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Josh. Follow me in pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So. You're not. Slide.
Me?
Yeah, slide.
Good morning, commissioners. This morning, we have 8 employees that are coming in to be recognized for our Road Scholars and Road Master program. I have Amanda from LVAC. She's gonna be coming in here and talk a little bit about the program, and then we'll be presenting the awards to the road and bridge employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for your time this morning. It's my pleasure to celebrate some of your employees today. Our mission at LTAC is to train folks in the form of classes held throughout the state, generally in the spring and the fall. The classes cover a wide variety of topics, including safety, professional development, and the largest portion being construction and maintenance techniques. Most of the courses have an exam and require an 80% or higher to pass. We want to make sure that when your staff is in class, they're getting educated and bringing the knowledge back with them to be shared. There are 2 levels to our program right now, the Road Scholar and the Road Master. So today we'll start with Road Scholar recipients. We have, if they would feel free to come up here and join me as I call your name. We have Larry Alley, William Rivers, Philip Powell, Aaron Seck, Sean Smiley, Jonas Top, Chris Williams, and Caden Oliver. The Road Scholar program includes approximately 80 hours of instruction, 7 core classes, such as roadway materials, pavement maintenance and preservation, flagger certification, and 4 electives. You have 4 years to complete this training. So this time I'd like to have everyone clap for their. For achieving this level, they're awarded a hat and a Leatherman. I have also stuff to give out to you guys. So don't leave right after this. I'll pass it out here. The next level is Roadmaster. So the Roadmaster builds upon everything you learned as a road scholar and includes an additional 80 hours of instruction. You take 4 core classes such as roadway drainage, environmental best management practices, speed limits and speed zones, as well as 5 electives. And you have 4 years to complete this level as well. So there are some of these folks that are standing up that are also getting Roadmasters. If I say your name, please wave so that you can be recognized. That's William Libbers, Philip Powell, Aaron Seck, Jonas Top, Chris Williams, and Caden Oliver. And in addition to the hat and the Leatherman, they will get a Carhartt jacket. Hopefully keep them warm on your roads. For this time, before I hand everything out, it'd be great if we could get a picture of everyone together, all the folks standing up here with some of the commissioners, if that's all right. We put that in our newsletter that goes across the state.
Where do you want?
All right. We're gonna squeeze together real tight. I can roll friends together. There you go. All right. So this picture will be featured. We'd like to celebrate everyone that gets these awards across the state. So we'll get your pictures. Okay, everyone look at me right here. 1, 2, 3.
Smelly feet.
Smelly feet. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Williams. Adopt us.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the order of agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the order of agenda to add executive session 1 day under hiring, and the reason being is to have the conversation with to be able to discuss having a forum at the Fair Board for their meeting that is next week. I have spoken with legal counsel and he advised this is an appropriate manner to do so.
Okay. Is there a second?
So was that Bill Wilson that gave the opinion?
Yes.
Okay, I second the motion.
Okay, we have first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
I have a request to amend the agenda under BOCC Commissioner Alma number 3, action discussion regarding scope of work related to Fairgrounds boundary line adjustment, Sewell and Associates not to exceed $25,000. I'm requesting that that item be tabled, as this was part of a discussion that wasn't on the agenda last Thursday. And I think this is premature and it wasn't agendized appropriately. So I would request that that be removed from this agenda item.
I would second that.
Okay, we got a first and second. All in favor?
Roll call vote?
Roll call vote?
Commissioner Ahmet,
No.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Bradshaw.
No. The order of agenda?
Well, excuse me for going backwards, but did we get a motion on Commissioner Ahmet's amendment request?
We did.
We did.
Okay, so,
And all in favor was aye.
okay, because I heard the
Okay.
second one. but-
He was specific.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the order of the agenda as amended.
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Another aye.
No. because I wanted it, something removed and it wasn't removed.
Okay.
So. don't second
All right,
that.
motion passes.
All right.
Okay, District 2 Commissioner Report.
All right. So first on my report out is Old Town. Last Thursday, I met with the Old Town community regarding their issues and concerns. And if you recall, it's something that I've committed to going to the communities and hearing what their concerns are so that I can report back to the board, but also provide some answers to community members. They were very organized and I owe them a big thank you. They put their information together, buttoned it up. We identified some key members in that community to be liaisons with some of our department heads so that there's some accountability and a clear path of communication. So I'm going to summarize some of the issues that they brought up. This was attended by over 40 people. And so they were very involved in this. A lot of it surrounded Road and Bridge. And I have to thank Road and Bridge, which I did also let Jason Top know that they had advanced worked on some of these issues and concerns for Old Town specifically, and they were very appreciative of it. So to recap, Freeman Lake Road has been a point of contention down in Old Town. There's been a thought that it was supposed to be chip sealed. There was some concern regarding the narrowness of the road. There was concern regarding the placement of stop signs and yield signs. One of the requests from that community was that Road and Bridge do a drive along that road with a community member during their high peak time of travel so that they can have a discussion about the individual spots where they would like to see some adjustments. That was the most expeditious way to identify concerns from the community, but also so that Road and Bridge can have that open dialogue with a community member. They will be reviewing all of the requests on Freeman Lake Road and getting a response back in about 2 weeks where we are with that road. This has a lot of history involved with it, dating back to 2017. So it was a huge breakthrough to be able to identify all of the concerns on that particular road. The other road that they had an issue was Langell Canyon Road. That one has been heavily involved in litigation. Road and Bridge actually already gave an answer to the community liaison for that regarding the history of that road and what we can and can't do. So we'll be able to give some feedback and allow the community to give some input on what they would like to see with that particular road. One idea is whether or not that road should be maintained by the county or not, because there's some restrictions that result from litigation on that particular road. Another road in question was Lee Road. That is a road that's owned by the county, but it is not a maintained county road. That road requires snowplow, but the community is responsible for plowing due to difficulties with the county plow being able to turn around. So there was some information sent out to that community regarding needing to make a dedicated where county controls that turnaround. So we will be in communication with that particular contact so that we can identify whether or not there were some property owners that were willing to give some of the land to make that turnaround for the community. So we'll be in communication with Road and Bridge and that community regarding that particular road. The other issue was weeds, and it was fantastic that Chase had already given us a good presentation on what weeds has to offer. And so we were able to give a community contact for Old Town and their issues regarding noxious weeds and invasive species. This was a very valuable interaction with the community. It allowed the community to feel heard and have actual connections with people within the county that they can expect to receive answers from with a clear follow-up. And I have to give a lot of their issues were Road and Bridge, and Road and Bridge was very responsive. One of the other concerns that existed in that community was we have a contract with Ponderay, which is not, it's Washington, to do some of our roads. And there's a feeling by our taxpayers that Ponderay is not doing the job correctly. And so Jason had already been in contact with that county, and he's reviewing that contract with an understanding that it's right. It's probably reasonable that Bonner County take back Freeman Lake Road because Washington doesn't plow over the weekends, and we might not be getting the best service for our residents that we should be. And so he, in advance even of this meeting, had already been working on this with Ponderay County. So hats off to Jason for being proactive on that. They're going through some changes in Ponderay County with different commissioners and Road and Bridge people, but we are definitely taking the first steps to move forward to improve the road conditions in Old Town. So as we move forward with Old Town, we'll do a follow-up, and one of their requests was that if Road and Bridge could come the next time and kind of give a little bit more explanation on how we assess roads, how we determine where signs go and the speed limit on some of the roads, how we choose stop signs versus yield signs. And so that's something that will be in the works, and I'll continue to give an updated report on how that community is doing. But again, thank you to all of the community members in Old Town that took the time to put that together and give us objective information that we could follow up on. So today I've also told the community that I sit on the behavior board for our region, which is the 5 northern counties. Today is the discussion for family and friends with suicide attempts. We know mental health is an issue in our community. So if you have an interest or a person that you know, it is the first Tuesday of every month. It's at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And it's something that you can call. I'll always bring the flyer on the day of this particular event. This is something that you might have someone that might be interested, or you might just want to participate to be knowledgeable in this area. So I encourage people to know that. Community concerns that I've received was members of the board have on Thursday, there's the item I asked to be removed regarding the fair board. It was listed as a grant discussion, and the discussion moved towards a boundary line adjustment. I'm going to address that issue, but I want to make sure I recognize that I received a lot of input regarding that. I was going to first attempt to have it removed based on the way it came to be discussed, but I'll leave all of that discussion in that section so it's clear. I received another request regarding the voice of the people. We have a lot of people unhappy that the board made a decision to only allow 4 people to speak, which is 12 minutes of public comment. There is a request that the board review participation from the public. We used to allow the public to give more than four people speaking, and we have a lot of significant topics, and they don't feel like they're able to be heard. So that's for the board to consider. This was I believe the chairman made the decision to only allow 4. So the request is that we revisit that. I received a request from a community member regarding the legislative IAC meeting. So these are meetings that occur every other week. They are available by Zoom, and what happens is we get a Zoom link. So I'll get a Zoom link and I'll log in and watch what's taking place. You do have the option to fly down to Boise and physically participate, but they do recognize that can be a strain, and so it is available by Zoom. Seth has not pushed out the next Zoom link for that, but when he does, I receive it. And I did ask, is there any reason that community members couldn't participate? And so I would want to address, like, going on to Idaho Sessions Public TV. You guys can watch everything that's happening at the legislature. It's free for us to watch, and I think it's valuable for us to participate in. In addition to things that I've already put on the calendar, I have scheduled for the 8th to meet with the DEQ and Panhandle Health. That was the agency that I was going to work with for the month of March to address our water issues. We're going to talk heavily about the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Members of the community that have concerns about water and sewer, my deadline is by the end of business day today. If you had a specific question you wanted me to have addressed, you have to get that to me by the end of business day today so that I can make sure to address your concerns. I don't meet until tomorrow at 4 p.m., but I'd like to make clear talking points with Panhandle Health so I can follow along with that. I will be in Clark Fork this Friday also. This month is Clark Fork's community meeting. That's the meeting that I'll have interfacing with the community. I will be meeting with some stakeholders in Clark Fork to address their issues and concerns in advance. They have a lot of development and planning issues and concerns that they want addressed. I wanted to also draw the community's attention to, we will again, I'll reiterate, on March 23rd, we are going to host the Advanced Open Meeting Law presentation from Idaho Association of County, as well as the ICRIMP presentation that Jim McNally did. And so that is going to be at 10 a.m. I keep repeating it, but there's been a lot of questions about that. We still have the Attorney General that is going to be coming in the month of April. We just have to get closer to the end of our legislative session. So I have already worked it out with our risk and our human resources and legal, and will be available to answer questions regarding advanced open meeting. And I'll make sure that I have some printouts of the open meeting laws that Raul Labrador, our new AG, did update. On the 28th of March at 8:30 in this room, in this building, we're going to have a Board of Equalization presentation for the county commissioners. That's a new item. We'll also have on 3/9, I sit on the CAT board for catastrophic medical. That's going to go away eventually, but that is going to be on the 9th today of March. And then on April 17th, I want to remind everybody about the liaison with the planning department or planning commissioners who are going to participate in educating us on our LUPA, our rules of how we're going about making our comp plan so that we can just provide a high level understanding of that topic and give the community an opportunity to understand their thought process so that we can engage in a way that's beneficial. There are some issues that are down at our state office that are important. So there was a difference of opinion on our health and welfare with respect to suicide prevention. Our committee has done a lot of work to help with mental health. One of the nice things that's happening is there is a bill to look at increasing rural nurses and to have a way to pull people into areas like ours. So we should watch for that. One site that I like, because it'll show you where our bills are, is Idaho Session. That's Session without an S, where you can follow first reading, second reading, and who is writing those and who's speaking about them so that you can follow through. It also gives you an opportunity to push your opinion to the people that are making those decisions for you. So I encourage you to look at that, as well as House Bill 085, because our DMV, we need our money essentially. That one continues to be spoken about. So that is what I have for an update for the community in that regard. Or there's one more, legislative action alert for House Bill 236 regarding public defense. There is a request from the Idaho Association of Counties that we push out requests to our legislatures regarding our position on this. The bill eliminates the State Public Defense Commission and repeals all PDC rules. If you have an interest in that, I did print it, but you can come and write the bill down. But sometimes we need to, as communities, since we're gathering, know what we need to reach out to our state reps on. And this is definitely one of those. So that will end my District 2 report.
Thank you. Commissioner Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week I did travel down to Boise to have the in-person IAC Legislative Committee meeting. This is a committee that meets every week. So tomorrow I will be meeting in Zoom, and it alternates. And just as a conversation about the cost, those costs are spread amongst the 5 northern counties. There was a process. I was nominated. I accepted, and now I travel down there. Some of the big bills that are being worked on, and one of them is certainly HO 236, the State Public Defender Act. This is a hot topic. There are those that are for, there are those that are against it. And it's challenging. I spoke with our public defender yesterday, and I don't want to speak for him, but he's hesitant. There are concerns. Anytime that we start spending millions of dollars, I think that that's a legitimate concern of the taxpayer. For a county such as our size, who has what is known as an institutional public defender, which is where our tax dollars pay for that office, there are additional expectations and requirements. And the big one is that a county such as Bonner, we will provide the place for them for at least 5 years to be housed. So from a county perspective, one of the first things we always think about is, what is it going to cost us? Well, we are already doing that. So there have been fierce negotiations from the governor's office, the legislature, and the public defenders. And so we will wait and see in regards to that one. Another bill that is very big in the minds of Bonner County and across the state is Senate Bill 1121, which is the rule of 80. Sometimes the legislature tries to fix something and there is oversight. In this case, what has happened is there are a series of our employees who are post-certified and they were left out. And what this is doing, it has created 2 different classes of employees that work in our law enforcement, specifically juvenile probation and others. This bill looked to be on a smooth pass for passage. And then there are some other agencies that also discovered that their employees were skipped. So now it's being held up. This was brought forward to me yesterday. Our meeting is tomorrow. I will get back to Sheriff Wheeler. I don't know if you have any employees that fall in that one for supervisory, and Mr. Stoltz. This is an important bill for our local employees. Another bill that has been advocated by juvenile services across the state is HO 199, and this is in regards to the vape tax. Having worked in a high school, I can tell you it is very difficult to stop a high school kid from vaping. Currently, there is a lot of lobbyists, and lobbyists, well, they spend money as they're paid because this is America and it's capitalism. And they've advocated for there not to be a tax. What the IAC is advocating is that vape, juice stuff, I don't know, I don't vape, that it is taxed in the same manner as other tobacco products. You can go on to the IAC website, I'm not certain of it at this time, and you can see which bills we support and which bills the IAC does not support. As a general rule of thumb, the IAC tries to focus on bills that affect local government. And one of the goals is to retain as much local control as possible, and then also to be fiscally responsible. Now, one of the things that I'm discovering, starting my 3rd month in public office, is that there are many things I do not know. Transparency in government is a hallmark of our Idaho Constitution. And there are a couple different types of transparency. There's ethical transparency, where you do it just because it's the right thing to do. There is fiscal transparency, which is because as government agencies, we are spending other people's money. And there's also procedural transparency. The public deserves to know how we are spending your money. And in that regards, we are moving for some of our local procedures to work on improving transparency. We are in the process of starting to work with EvoGov to update our website. And the 2 goals that I believe should be self-service for our citizens and transparency. Another big deal to me is fiscal transparency. We spend millions of dollars in this county to provide services to our constituents. And sometimes there are questions of where is that money going? Personally, I believe that Bonner County tax dollars should try to be kept in Bonner County to support Bonner County families, to support Bonner County roads, and to feed and house residents of Bonner County. What I'm discovering, specifically with some of our civil litigation and in regards to where we send money, is that we send an awful lot of money out of state. And I wonder why. Because personally, I want that money to stay in Bonner County, as I have previously stated. For example, with the ARPA CARES Act, just as something to bring forward, so far for compliance measures, we have spent $508,000, $273.84. Of that $508,000, $43,000 was spent on local attorneys. $465,000 was spent to a California firm. ARPA and CARES is it's a governmental program that I'm pretty sure is ripe with some challenges. $463,000 bouncing around in Bonner County is a good thing. Some other examples of firms that we employ that are out of state is we employ Witherspoon Kelly, Spokane, Washington, Sky Consulting, Coralville, Iowa, Buckalter, Los Angeles. And some of these rates that we're paying for these attorneys that are out of state ranges from $200 to $650 an hour of our Bonner County money that we are shipping to places that is not bouncing around in Bonner County. And I guess one of my big questions that I'm working to develop my understanding is why. I am looking, and I look forward to getting more answers as we go forward with this, and there will be more on our agenda as we do so. an update from last week in regards to the policies. I would like us to see a workshop and some scheduling. I called Commissioner McDonald, I called Commissioner Conley, and I spoke with Chairman Bradshaw. The updates for those policies were not requested. And there is an interesting correlation in regards to our policy manual, which I printed and I'm reading. It's pretty hefty, as it should be. And it is, the policy manual is a product of the commissioners. So in regards to whistleblowers, Idaho law is very good. And here's just a beginning of that. An employer may not take adverse action against an employee because the employee or a person authorized to act on behalf of the employee communicate in good faith, the existence of any waste of public funds, property or manpower, or a violation or suspected violation of a law, rule, or regulation adopted under the law of this state, a political subdivision of this state, which is Bonner County, or the United States. Such communication shall be made at a time and in a manner that gives the employer reasonable opportunity to correct the waste or violation. So even though we may not have it in our policy manual, state law of which we are a political subdivision most certainly applies. So Bonner County has been protected by whistleblowers, and this goes back, added in 1994, so this is not new. There is also federal whistleblower protections that protect our employees as they seek to serve our constituency. Finally, I look forward to getting these answers because I want to understand, and I want to know, and I want the public to know that our government is serving you in the best way possible. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'll open it up to public comment. You will keep your comments directed to things that are pertinent to this board. Any derogatory, personal attacks, things of that nature, you will be stopped and asked to leave. If you do not leave, then you will be assisted in that process. So at this time, I will call, we're going to limit it to 12 minutes. So be brief if you can, so that more can speak. And Miss Darla Fletcher. State your name for the record.
Darla Fletcher, Perrywood, Idaho. Good morning, Mr. Commissioner, Mrs. Commissioner, and neighbors. I'm here to ask for the removal of Glenn Bailey from the Panhandle Health Board, and I want you to know why. Last year, there were 485,000 excess deaths occurring in America. These aren't just statistics. These are people who were loved, and maybe some of them were somebody you knew. We're witnessing a catastrophic failure of public health. The experts told us that masks would stop the spread. They told us keep the kids out of school. They told us that ventilators and remdesivir would save lives. They told us the vaccine would end the pandemic. They told us vaccinal immunity was superior to natural immunity. And every single one of these claims is a demonstrable falsehood. They told us the incidence of myocarditis is very rare, on the order of 1 in a million. Yet another lie. The truth is that the incidence of this myocarditis is 1 in 35 in young males, as documented in peer-reviewed literature. The failures of the federal health experts lead directly to the failures of public health in Idaho. The health districts take their marching orders directly from the same experts, those who lied. Enter Glenn Bailey. The Idaho health districts enjoy a unique legal status. They're not held accountable to the governor, the state legislature, nor the county commissioners. They operate autonomously. They set their own policies, which is to say they take the easy way out and they follow the dictates of the federal government, the source of most of their money. House Bill 160, which is currently going through the Idaho legislature, was written by another Panhandle Health Board member from Bonner County, Dr. Thomas Fletcher. This seeks to make the Idaho public health districts accountable to the state legislature that we put there instead of the liars in Washington. House Bill 160 seeks to protect your medical freedom from the government tyrants. And according to the Idaho statute 39-411, board members are appointed and removed by the boards of the county commissioners. All members shall be chosen with due regard to their knowledge and interest in public health and in promoting the health of the citizens of this state and the public health district. Glenn Bailey, the current chairman of the Idaho Health Trustees, recently called an emergency meeting to discuss House Bill 160. He and the others scoffed at the bill and calling it, quote, soiled garbage. And I have the audio of that meeting to prove everything that I'm saying. Is this who you really want representing you on the health board? I see him unfit to serve in this capacity. He's a pawn of Anthony Fauci and his ilk. Glenn Bailey does the bidding of the totalitarians. We, the people, need to take control of our freedoms at the local level. Words of Ronald Reagan. And I would implore you, commissioners, and the public to get behind you to remove Glenn Bailey from the Panhandle Health Board and give us another Alan Banks. I want somebody with intellect, ethics, and a spine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick comment on House Bill 160. I was down there when it got taken to the Health and Welfare Board. That bill would demand that Panhandle Health District and the other health districts in Idaho, for any procedure, vaccine, or medication that they would recommend or provide, they must give you a risk benefit analysis, which your doctors, your local clinics are required by federal law to do. However, your 7 health districts are not. So this protects your health freedom. And I can't visualize any legislator on a roll call vote saying no to this health bill, where you don't have the right to know the health risk benefit of that particular procedure or drug that's being administered to you. You have a right to know that. That's what this bill forces the health districts to do. It's no extra homework for the legislators. It would fall onto the health districts that they get that benefit analysis done and provide it to you, and they would have to answer to your legislators, which controls their state funding. It would be for you. So contact all your legislators and tell them this bill needs to go through. This is America. This is Idaho, and we have a right to that protection and to that knowledge and information. Sheriff Wheeler. Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Sheriff Darrell Wheeler. For the record, with the passing of the former borough board, I thought the land deals would end. Unfortunately, this is not so. The last item on the agenda today is something that is of great importance to the judges, the prosecutor, and the sheriff. Not one of us were invited to the table to discuss this land deal. Just like the other land deals of the past, this one is not supported by the people in general or the people it will most affect. Despite being promoted as a smart use of taxpayer resources, it falls to meet this goal both in short term and in long term. Starting on January 6, 2022, the BOCC held a Fair Board workshop where this project was discussed. It appeared that only Commissioner McDonald and one member of the Fair staff had knowledge of the layout, which included approximately 2 acres of Sheriff's Complex property in which the 34 RV spaces were to be located. On the campground expansion application, there were several inaccuracies. One blaring inaccuracy in the application was the site description. The RV site, quote, the RV site location is a 5-acre section of land in the most southwest corner of the same parcel as the Bonner County Fairgrounds at 4203 North Boyer Road, Sandpoint, Idaho. In reality, the part of this parcel and all of the proposed 34 RV spaces are resting on the Sheriff's Complex property. Last year, there was an extensive debate during the various BOCC business meetings, and former Commissioner Connolly asked if the RV park could be reclaimed in the future for a justice center if the RV park was built on the Sheriff's Complex property. Now, Commissioner Connolly came away from that meeting with the belief that it could be reclaimed, and this is not true. Once the property is given to the Fair Board, it is no longer can be taken back by a future Board of County Commissioners. Next, the issue of public comment. As part of the application, the applicant must provide an opportunity for public comment. Proof of public comment is supposed to be began 1 year before submitting the application. This is not followed, and the application may be deemed ineligible. I have not been provided with any such documentation. And lastly, there was an effort to clean up the property lines outside the purview of the public. On December 7th of 2022, a contract was sent from a local firm to a Fair Board employee in an effort to conduct a land survey at the Sheriff's Complex property in order to establish a new lot line. The Fair Board had no legal authority to sign and authorize that work. Because of this, Bonner County Prosecutor's Office put a stop to this effort on January 6, 2023. Because of these reasons and more, I urge this board to immediately change course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Sheriff.
Christina Anderson.
Morning, can you hear me?
You might have to speak up. We can hear you, but you're trying to get it out to them.
Okay,
Just state your name for the record.
Christina L. Nicholas Anderson. Good morning, Commissioners, Chairman, community members, media. Good morning. I'd like to reiterate my concerns for the record, the current state of the Bonner County Fairgrounds. On February 7th, 2023, I first presented verbal comments via Zoom, educating the Board of County Commissioners obligations per code 22-202, which reads in part, quote, any vacancy occurring on such county fair board shall be fulfilled by appointment by the county commissioners at their first meeting after occurrence of such vacancy, end quote. I informed you the fair board is a 7-member board, which had 1 vacancy, 4 expired positions, and 2 active board members. I also informed that the expired seats were still acting in capacities as though they were active in good standing. Be sure, as a citizen, I respect and I do appreciate the work done by these dedicated volunteers. I'm sure it's not been an easy road. Since then, I've had additional face-to-face and email contacts regarding this issue, and at least 2 formal emails addressed to all 3 commissioners. I formally requested that this be added to the decision and action portion of the Board of County Commissioners public business meeting. To date, it's not been on there. This has been over the last 4+ weeks. As I pointed out in most of these contacts, and again this past week, we are now down to only 1 Fair Board member since the resignation of Mr. Hollett on 2/21/23. I'd also like to point out, since that resignation, per the code, it goes on to say that at the next meeting, you would have had an obligation to fill that vacancy, which would have fallen on your February 28th meeting. I reminded you last week, a quorum cannot be met for the upcoming Fair Board meeting scheduled for this coming Monday. I let you know I would be bringing a lawyer to shut down that meeting if necessary to face you to fulfill your duties in the absence of further action after
Action. After further consideration, I've decided that is counterproductive at this time, as it doesn't serve to be helpful for creating forward progress. You doing your job would be. Today, you add this executive session. Thank you for adding it, although last minute, and per the public meeting rules, it does say you need to state what the emergency is for changing and amending your meeting at the last minute. I kind of wonder where the transparency was on that. However, I want to point out that that should not be done in secrecy. The appointing of a fair board member doesn't need to be done behind closed doors, especially when I've been transparent and trying to get you to take this action for over a month. I feel that needs to be done. We're your community members, the very people who are applying for those positions should be a part of that discussion. In conclusion, after last week's executive session, Commissioner Ott, you informed me that ultimately to appoint the fair board members was the duty of the chairman. That's you, Mr. Bradshaw. So with that, I look to you, Chairman Bradshaw, and I wonder at what point you will act on your responsibility to the fairgrounds, to our community, the citizens that have elected you to do your job. I ultimately request that action be taken immediately and that we get your job to be done or find somebody who will do it for you. Thank you.
That has actually been added on to the executive session today. And the reason that we go through those applications in an executive session is so people's private information is not just put out there without their permission. But that will be taken care of this morning. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll wait till after executive session. So
Well, all righty then.
Mr. Chairman, may I make some corrections to some erroneous information that I am at fault? I gave you bad information.
I'm aware.
I apologize.
Okay.
I hope to not have it happen again. We have 3 active members that are currently in compliance. I am also working to get the web. When I say I have asked people who know what they're doing to fix the website so that we are not, as a county, putting out bad information. I have been speaking with Mr. Wilson, our attorney, and it's CYA, and you'll hear that again, which means consult your attorney. And I have been consulting with our attorney. The Fair Board, as many people know, is a exceedingly unique creation of Idaho law. And it appears, I'm looking, you're right in the way. I want to, Mr. Wilson, would you just make sure that I don't mess this up? Sure. No problem.
That's why we pay him the big money.
CYA is that any of the commissioners can nominate, and we'll get into that. So we're trying to get to a quorum. That is the emergency. And what we will be doing, as in with all executive sessions, any decision made will be made in public in accordance with Idaho state law.
To your point, though, you've been asking for an update. And so we have received the information has been given to the chairman to make a decision regarding the process. There have been members of the community that have been actively sending in applications to be on that fair board. And the frustration is that no one is being told what is the process, when is a decision going to be made, whether or not you can participate in. And in that, the board needs to do a better job of being transparent of the process so you know what's happening, even if they can't be detailed to you. And so Mr. Wilson did give a recommendation to the board that this needs to happen, but you also have, it's the chairman that actually appoints, even though we're all going to pay attention to it. So I do encourage everybody to stay after, because I'm not certain of what the Fair Board executive session discussion will be, but we should be able reasonably to come out and give some direction for all of those who took the time to write very detailed letters of your expertise while you wanted to participate, even those members who wanted to re-up their participation on that board, because we should come out with answers. If we don't, then you can do what you want to do after that. But the communication should increase with that issue, because a lot of people want to know.
So since the website has not been updated, I know this isn't a question and answer period, but a follow-up to your comment. Are you at liberty to say who the active members are? Because the website clearly is not updated. And in your correspondence to me this week, you said that there was only one active member.
That's why I apologized. I was wrong. The only one I know that I can tell you, and that's because I went to elementary school with them at Northside, where we were Huskies, go Huskies, is Eddie Gordon.
And he's the one on the website.
And he's the one on the website. And that's why, as I will make my 3rd public apology to you, I was wrong. I remain having been wrong and I am working to correct it.
And
So I don't,
yeah.
I'm
yeah.
trying to avoid having to issue a 4th and 5th public apology for giving the wrong names, if I may.
Okay.
But you know the other 2 names, that's what she's asking.
I was told them, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Leah Blackman and Gail Curlis.
Okay,
There,
okay,
there.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
And I want to
for
give
bailing me out.
one disclaimer is that some people feel like they told the prior board that they wanted to stay on the board and that should count. So that's something that has to be reviewed of how many people are we actually looking for and who are actually on the board.
Okay,
Okay.
right, so we have a board of some sort, that's great,
Ish.
You will have a forum for that meeting.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we got time for one more. Carrie Davis, is that right? Chris,
I'll defer to the next speaker.
okay. Anybody else? Ms. Gunther.
As a point person, Mr. Chairman.
It's my decision, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Gunther.
Monica Gunner. And this is, again, the Fairgrounds, the Daryl Wheeler's project, or the fight against the campgrounds. Now, I happen to know the campgrounds, the existing campgrounds at the fairgrounds are not always full. They are full during rodeo and they're full during fair. I can't not imagine taking away sheriff property for this project when they can, if they want more campgrounds, go along the fence line to the sheriff's property, but no reason to go back into the sheriff's property. This county is growing. It's going to get worse. We're going to need more jail room. And if we don't do this, if we don't save what we've got, a beautiful, beautiful area for a sheriff's, for a complex, we're going to give it away and then we're going to be screwed down in the future. And the fairgrounds doesn't need the campground as much as we need sheriff space.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Dan Rose for the record.
We will close public comment at this
I'm
time.
setting up number 4.
We are closed.
There's a. That we
Mr. Rose,
are non.
you are recognized by the chair. You may sit down or leave.
There's a non-binding advisory ballot question that we wish that you consider and add to agenda
Mr. Chairman,
items.
I would request a recess until we can go back to order.
You have violated the code and you're violating open meeting law. You've arbitrarily stated that only 4 witnesses are allowed to speak. I was on the list as the 4th witness and you have it. And I will be requesting it.
And that's my decision as chairman. You are done, Mr. Rose. Make the call.
And I'm a citizen under ordinance,
Make the call.
and
I want him out of here.
under county ordinance
We're in recess until he is removed from this building.
to stuff that is immediately important to this county. And this
Mr. Rose,
is important.
Mr. Rose,
You are acting in a way that you are not obligated to do. I have the right to speak, and it says specifically in the code to participate in items that are of importance to the county. And I state, and I'll quote it, 200, to enable citizens with issues or concerns which they wish to bring to the board's attention to afford an opportunity for consideration on a future agenda for public board action. Title 102B. Title 200 reads, this chapter is enacted for the purpose of establishing regular meeting schedule for the Bonner County Board of Commissioners in order that the board activities can be carried out with greater participation and awareness. 2 of your ordinances, I am complying, I'm on the list in compliance, and you're choosing not to act because you don't want to hear the truth. And the truth is to offer you what the sheriff said was a possible violation. I offer you the solution. That is to make the public comment, which you have not done, a non-binding advisory ballot question for this May's election. But you have to do that
by March 27th. So I am requesting that you take that up and you put it on as an advisory question and then fulfill the public comment access the sheriff said you didn't do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Okay, at this time, I will take a motion on the consent agenda. Oh, one thing for Mr. Patterson, who is probably going to ask the question. Had we not run out of time, you got $5,634 for facilities. You've got $156,775 for vehicles, sheriff's department. And then bulletproof vest, $13,785.03. So we are at the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, based on the information before us, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
No, because I have an issue with the sheriff's complex being on the agenda, so you had to have to second it.
Well, I'll step down from the chair and second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Mr. Rosedale?
You're not still in recess, are you?
No.
Morning, people.
Yeah.
Chairman, I believe you did say recess.
Yeah, so we are back in session. How's that?
All right.
All right.
Before you, I have claims batch number 11, in the amount of $420,901.87. And demand batch number 11, the amount of $263,674.46, totaling $684,576.33 for your approval.
I move to approve payment of the FY23 claims and demands batch number 11 totaling $684,576.33.
I second the motion.
You got first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Thank you. Next, I have EMS claims batch number 11 in the amount of $14,652.36.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve payment of the fiscal 23 EMS claims in batch number 11 totaling $14,652.36.
I second the motion.
Okay, got a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Justice Services, Ron.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone else. I have two items this morning. Item number one is from lottery tax unanticipated revenues. So Bonner County Justice Services receives lottery tax monies from the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections each fiscal year. Justice Services Department has received lottery tax of unanticipated revenue in the amount of $3,945.02. The total lottery tax received from the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections is $62,600.02.
Based upon the information before us, I move to approve resolution 2317, ordering the clerk to schedule revenue in the probation services FY 22-23 budget in the account number ending in 7430, repairs and maintenance, building fixtures, grounds by $3,942.02 from $58,655.00 to $62,600.02. This adjustment is due to the receipt of unanticipated lottery tax revenue received from the state of Idaho.
I second the motion.
All right, got a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Item number two is similar, other than in that Bonner County Justice Services receives monies from Boundary County, Idaho, Lincoln County, Montana, the Kootenai Tribe of Idaho, and the Idaho Department of Juvenile Corrections for housing their juveniles in our Bonner County Juvenile Detention Center each fiscal year. Justice Services has received unanticipated revenue from these contracts in the amount of $15,893. total monies received from the reference contracts for housing juvenile offenders this year or this past fiscal year was $35,892.78.
Mr. Chairman, based upon the information before us, I move to approve resolution 23-18. Ordering the clerk to schedule revenue in the juvenile detention fiscal year 22-23 budget, revenue account ending in 4990. Juvenile detention billing for use as additional funding for juvenile detention fiscal year 22-23 budget. Account ending in 6110. Overtime in the amount of $5,000 and for use as additional funding for juvenile detention fiscal year 22-23. Account ending in 7430. Repairs and maintenance buildings, fixtures, grounds in the amount of $30,892.78. The adjustment is due to the receipt of unanticipated revenue received from contracts for housing juvenile offenders in the Bonner County Juvenile Detention Center.
I second the motion.
All right, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Road and Bridge,
Thank you.
Mr. Top.
you.
Thank you, Ron.
All right. Commissioner Jason Top, Director of Road and Bridge for the record. What I have before you guys is our magnesium chloride procurements. We're requesting to go out and advertise for these. We budget about $545,000 to tree roughly 400 miles of road. With this magnesium chloride, it usually uses about 4,000 tons to do a single shot application. On these roads, some of our roads end up with a double or triple shot, so we adjust accordingly, depending on the traffic. We use those for roads that have over 100 cars a day. For the traffic, it keeps the dust abatement down, helps with material loss, so that our materials that we have put down there have a better longevity. Those of you that may not know this, on a road that has about 100 cars a day, a 35-mile road, you're gonna lose about an inch and a half of gravel to dust a year. And we don't get back to these roads sometimes for 15, 16 years before we get back to them. We have 600-700 miles of road that we're actually putting all this gravel on. So, man, I'm getting nervous again. Anyhow, that's up here for your consideration for us to go out for advertisement for those.
All right. I move to approve this notice of advertisement for the 2023 magnesium chloride bid.
I would second the motion.
Okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
Questions?
Human Resources.
Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. We have Cindy Baker for the record. We have today requests to recruit. We have a road and bridge assistant manager, D2, recruiting for a vacated position. Heavy equipment operator, D2 for road and bridge, recruiting for a vacated position. A justice services detention officer 2, recruiting for a vacated position. And the solid waste administrative assistant, recruiting for vacated position. That's it.
Mr. Chairman, based on the information before us, I move to approve commencing with approval of the following vacated position. Assistant Manager and Heavy Equipment Operator, Road and Bridge. Detention Officer 2, Justice Services. And Administrative Assistant, Solid Waste, effective March 7th, 2023.
I second the motion.
Okay, we got a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Next, we have Dave Shook. You out there, Dave?
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Barely.
I'll try and speak up. Thank you for your time today. Dave Shook for the record. I have two items before you. They are remarkably similar in that they are both hangar leases at Priest River Airport. The first one, we have the opportunity to lease hangar shelter number 5 at Priest River Airport. This lease will be for 3 years with escalating rental rates each year as outlined in the lease. I recommend entering into this lease.
Based on the information before us, we move that Bonner County enter into the lease agreement for shelter number 5 at Priest River Airport.
I would second the motion.
We got a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Next.
Thank you.
we have Item 2.
Second item is the same idea for shelter number 7 at Priest River Airport. This lease will be for 5 years with escalating rates as outlined in the lease itself. I recommend entering this lease also.
Mr. Chairman, based on the information before us, I move that Bonner County enter into this lease agreement.
I second the motion.
Okay, got a first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Oh, apologies.
motion passes.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sheriff Wheeler.
Morning again, Commissioners. Bonner County Sheriff's Office would like the approval to enter into a contract with Canon Solutions America, Inc. to purchase a new printer for the jail. The term of the contract would be for 60 months, and the cost of per image will be 0.138 cents. We'll be purchasing the printer for just over $1,000. All the maintenance will be provided in this contract.
All right, based on the information before us, I move to accept and approve this contract. I further move the chairman to sign the agreement document administratively.
I second the motion.
All right, first and second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Next, we have BOCC,
All right.
Commissioner Williams.
First item that I have on the agenda is to review discussion of the RV code amendment. I'm going to have Mr. Dave Bowman give a presentation on this, and then we'll have a discussion. This has been something the community has asked for that we review. It hasn't come on our agenda yet. So with that, Mr. Bowman, if you can go at the podium, that way they can see you clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Bowman for the record. So a month ago, I asked in public comment period to initiate a code amendment to disallow RV parks in rural areas. Right now, they're permitted in the commercial use table, and they are in forestry and ag forest and rural residential, and we're asking to take those out. After that comment, or during that, when I made that comment, there were lots and lots and lots of comments from the public and none against. Everybody was for. Even Jeremy Grimm on the record said, I rarely agree with the Bowmans, but in this case, this is a great idea. Afterwards, I spoke with the planning director, who also, he's not here, so he can defend himself later, but he said he thought it made good sense too, as did our county attorney, and hopefully I'm not speaking on a turn. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, the only people that want RV parks in rural areas are the developers. And this is something I didn't know when I made the request before, but I just recently learned in 2019, when the code amendment to allow RV parks in these rural areas came before the P&Z Commission, they brought forth the people brought a petition signed by 198 people, and they packed this room against it. And for some reason, the P&Z and the BOCC both, the P&Z recommended approval and the BOCC did approve it. So the question to that is why? I don't know why. I could guess. People in rural areas just don't want to live next to RV parks. So we have there's one currently that's been, the CUP was approved in Blanchard. For reference, and that case is under judicial review right now. So the people who live there have put forth their time and their hard-earned money to hire a lawyer and go to court to fight this thing, and for good reason. So in that case, we have a 4.1 acre parcel in an R5 zone. And this gentleman was granted a conditional use permit for an RV park with 20 spaces. So he's been allowed by the BOCC, not these guys, the former one, to increase the density to 500% of what is currently allowed in that zone. Mr. Ahmed, you said avoiding litigation is a top priority. I couldn't agree more. You vote to move this amendment forward, and you'll be moving in that direction. So a few points, there are lots, but I'll try to be brief here, but a few points why they really shouldn't be allowed RV parks. And I want to differentiate RV parks versus RVs. So our current code says you can have 2 RVs on your property if you have a 5 acre or better property. We have no objection to that. That's for people to live in, and it's a way to. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not the same as an RV park where you're putting a whole bunch of RVs on one piece of property. So they're intended, RV parks are intended to be used for recreational purposes, and the rural zones, they're not recreational areas. They're where people live. Rural living is really not congruous with RV parks. There's no way to prevent them from being used as permanent housing. In fact, the one that we are in court on right now, he, on his application, said that this would be, it should be passed because it would be affordable housing. Allowing the RV parks could easily quadruple the density or even more, which in this other case, so it's a negative impact. Schools, traffic, law enforcement, solid waste, fire, EMS, they're all impacted. And the cost of those services that are impacted, they're not borne by the RV park owner, because you've got one person paying property tax on one parcel with 20 residents there. So all these services are impacted, but the cost is borne by all the other people in the county. Again, up to 500% of the density. So we've got issues with fire hazards, right? They're all packed close together, especially in the wintertime. In a lot of cases, they have a trouble to keep them warm. And so they're using who knows what kind of unsafe heating arrangement in there. And they're all packed together. So if one catches fire, you got a big issue where you probably don't have water to fight the fire, and you don't necessarily have good ingress and egress. Fumes, noise, lights associated with RVs that are not a good match with rural living. Picture, you've got a 5 acre lot next to where you live with 20 RVs and they're all running a generator 24/7. Nobody wants that. No way to control individual water usage, right? So RV parks are highly likely to use more water than would be used, again, because of the increased density. Than what would be used in the underlying allowed densities. Nobody knows how much water is within any given rural area. So we have no way to ensure that there's adequate water for drinking, fire suppression, sewage, all required by Title 12. No way to know if RV water usage in dump sites or septic systems would affect nearby wells adversely. Certainly much more significant impact than one septic tank on a parcel for one home. And then snow. So we all have to deal with, if we're living on a rural area, to get rid of your snow somewhere. And I know on my own property, it's a challenge. And we have 23 acres and just find a place to put the snow. So now think about 20 RVs with parking spaces on a 5 acre lot. Where do they put their snow? It's an issue. And it came up in this other case, and it kind of got, they kind of looked the other way on it. So, I'm just going to say moving this amendment forward is the right thing to do. You can right or wrong in the tables and support your constituents. It's a super easy code amendment. You simply strike C for conditional use permit out of the commercial use table under forestry, ag forest, rural service center, and rural residential. And put these RVs where they belong in suburban areas where you have, or suburban and commercial areas where you have commercial, or urban services. If you don't move it forward, you'll probably be the only people in the whole county that want RV parks in rural places, except for the developers. They put them because they can make lots of money while not having to pay for the impacts. So we're asking the county, please amend Bonner County zoning code as soon as possible to disallow RV parks and campgrounds in the rural zoning districts. Leave them where they belong, in places where there are recreational opportunities and urban services. Mike?
Dave, you can repeat this with the mic, but going from 1 to 20 isn't a 500%, that's 2,000%.
Well, it's not 1, it's 4.
Okay.
So you have 1 home, 1 ADU, and 2 RVs. Okay, that's 4. Right. But your math was right.
Just wanted to make sure. Didn't underestimate.
Or is this a test? Yes, all right, so let's see, in conclusion, RV parks and campgrounds are already in existence. Oh, I covered that elsewhere. And then currently, any parcel of 5 acres or greater is allowed to have 2 RVs. No, that one I said. RV parks and campgrounds that are already in existence can still be allowed under code non-conforming rules. So there's no issue if you move forward this with anybody who's already got it in existence. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
So, hi, Dave.
Hi.
So I'm a little confused here. So so we don't want RV parks in rural areas, which I can respect. But I believe I heard you say that we want RV parks in suburban areas where the density, we have infrastructure.
Where you have urban service.
Okay, so because previously in this meeting, I could have sworn that we don't want RV parks at an existing expansion of the fairground. So is the fairground within city limits? So
That's a city issue.
actually, it's to be very clear, the fairgrounds is owned by, thank you if I may. The fairgrounds is owned by Bonner County. And that ground is controlled by Bonner County. So I'm just,
Okay, so what's the question?
well, I'm wondering if so we don't, thank you. My question is, so what I'm hearing is we don't want them in the county, in the unincorporated areas, but we also don't want them in the cities. So where do we want them?
Well, I didn't say unincorporated. I said rural.
Okay, so we are okay, because I believe that I heard we wanted them in suburban and areas where there's infrastructure.
I'm saying rural,
If I may, it was my question. I would appreciate the opportunity for Mr. Bowman to respond.
so I don't have the table in front of me, but I would leave them in commercial. I would leave them in suburban. And I don't have the table in front of me. I'd take them out of ag forest, take them out of forestry and rural residential, only those 3. Leave them in commercial, leave them in suburban. And I mean, why not leave them at the fairgrounds like they are?
Thank you.
Just don't expand it.
And recreation.
Yeah, oh, definitely recreation. Yeah, that's where they belong.
So the agenda item that I have here isn't to where should we put them? It's really looking at the impact to our infrastructure and where our county needs are best met. And so although we can use the example of the RV park, this is not specific to that. But one of the things that you can see has happened is the increase in density requires the community in a rural area to absorb all of the cost related to that increase in density. And West Bonner County School District is a very good example. We're going to a 4-day school week. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough drivers, but we're increasing the density. And so when you look at growing a community and where you want people to grow, it is around the existing infrastructure. We can't grow in areas that we can't support, because what happens is what we're experiencing right now in District 2 is for many people, schools are seen as not just an education system, but whether we like the way it sounds or not, it also comes a point of childcare. And so losing a full day in that week negatively impacts the current residents of a particular area. And so when you see an increased growth at that particular rate, we also have to look at, well, how are we paying for that? We, in this example that's being used, and I'll also say it's not related, but it's a good example of 20 homes that would potentially impact the infrastructure and pull out of the pot without putting back into the pot. And so it's not sustainable. And so we fracture an already fractured infrastructure in the rural area. And so the purpose is to not allow, in some ways, a loophole that increases density through the use of RV long-term living. This isn't, whether or not someone says they will or won't, if the ability to be long-term on the piece of property exists, you have to go to that extreme, because that's the worst impact that you could anticipate. That way you can reasonably do a compare and contrast of what's the impact. So I would make a motion that we remove RV from rural zoning districts. Sorry,
No,
we're
I'm just
looking for.
wondering, doesn't this require a hearing, Mr. Wilson? I mean, if we start.
Yeah, I would think that it would be remanded back to planning and zoning
I'd kind of like to,
and then go.
So
from
my
there.
thought was you could motion to do it and then do the work
well,
to move forward with it. So if that thinking is wrong, you correct me.
Right, so are you saying, Bill Wilson for the record, everybody, the motion would be to direct planning.
Direct
to
planning to
initiate,
initiate it. Yep.
a legislative change.
Mhm.
That's perfect. Yeah, we wouldn't take it up today as a final
No.
matter, but of course, we have that process in place. Planning will work on, it's really not much of a change at all, as Dave has mentioned, it's just taking one little letter out of a use table, so we just have to get run through the appropriate channels. You guys can
Start the process.
move to direct planning to do that today.
Commissioner Williams, if I may, I will second your motion, but I would like to continue with the discussion before we do so. I've taught for Mr. Chairman, if that's all right.
You may.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams, I intend to second your motion, to be clear. I taught for 10 years in a 4-day school week, and there is some issues I would like to bring forward. And that is housing. Yesterday at a meeting, I was in discussion with a community member talking about how people cannot afford to live here. At some point, we're going to have to look, are we closing the doors because we are here and we aren't letting anybody else in? I have this crazy idea that this is the United States of America and freedom of movement is allowed. And in regards to the 4-day school week, let me tell you about what happened in Boundary County School District. That is a blue collar school district. And it is incredible how many high school kids were working 40 hours a week and they were attending school. If you look around at the demographics of Bonner County, and as Ms. Binkert has brought forward, we're going to have Sam Wolkenauer come, and I would encourage members of the public to come and listen to the demographic realities of what is going on in our county. We are an aging population, and full disclosure, I hope to age gracefully too. The youth of our community, having taught for 10 years, can do basic and simple math. Our workforce is fleeing. They cannot afford to live here. Kids, youth, young adults, this is a challenging environment. And one of the 3 basic necessities is having a roof over your head. I do believe that it's appropriate to remand this back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, where we are going to put our future workforce, as some like myself continue to get older, is an important thing that I want put on the record today as a consideration. And I look forward to remanding this. And I look forward to seeing, because we have a process. In my campaign, I talked about not making amendments to the plan, to the comp plan willy-nilly. I spoke with Mr. Grimm about this, and I must say I'm largely sympathetic, but I also know that there are laws of unintended consequences in how we do things. We have processes. We are in the midst of our comprehensive plan. This is going to come before us. And if we do vote to do so, I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
So I just want to give a response to some things. The question isn't whether or not people need a place to live. It's where is the appropriate place to expand in this way. And so the infrastructure that's negatively impacted matters to whether you want to move here or you currently live here. You move here and we can't serve you. You live here and we can't serve you. The net is still we can't serve you if you build in an area that we don't have the infrastructure to support it. So part of the obligation of planning and commissioners, it is to do the hard job of saying where we should have this development. And yes, it's nice to say there are areas that are rural that are beautiful that people would like to live in. But if it doesn't support the infrastructure of this particular type of growth, and in this one, there's a lot of issues that come with increasing that density. It's one taxing lot with potentially 21, 22 people that will pull out of the pot. So if you had a great big pot of money right here and everybody took, but only one person gave, we are not meeting the needs of anybody that lives here, whether you move here or you're currently here. So that's a specious argument for saying, let's just grow. In terms of the 4-day school week, the start of a 4-day school week from a 5-day school week is very difficult on families. That doesn't, 4-day school weeks have been proven to be sufficient and actually in some cases beneficial, but it doesn't change the fact that the change from 5 to 4 is negative to the family that has depended on 5 for a lifetime. So that there is no, And that's whether you move here or you come. Some people move here with an expectation that their family's working 2 jobs and these kids are young and they have to go to school. So we don't have, for example, if you look at Southwest Bonner County, where's the daycare? Where's the after-school programs that are going to take care of the kids while the families are working? That's part of infrastructure. And I will say that in working with some people in the school who are on the school board in Southwest Bonner County, there were a lot of unhappy parents with us moving that to a 4-day week. That's an adjustment. It doesn't change that we don't have the infrastructure, and it's not equitable. Since we want to say affordable, it is not an equitable distribution of our resources because there's a lack of the resources in the rural area, especially in unincorporated areas. And the RV issue on the fairgrounds has nothing to do with whether or not we build permanent housing RV parks on small acreage in rural areas. It's nowhere near the same. We have to be reasonable for all, whether you're here or you're coming. And we can't encourage people to come to an area where we don't have the infrastructure, and then they're here, and what do we do?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
It is not a specious argument for some of us to want our Bonner County future generations to have the same opportunities that we did. I'm not even going to begin to speak about how frustrating that is to hear. I think that our youth, at a minimum, deserve the same opportunities that I have had. At some point, Lord willing, I am a grandparent. I would love to have some of the opportunities where my kids get the opportunity to go visit grandpa 6 miles one way and grandma 6 miles the other way. And you are dang right that I am willing to do anything I can to fight for my 4th generation kids, hopefully 5th generation, to have those same opportunities. And in regards to specious arguments, I feel like after teaching for 15 years and having taught in schools and having kids go to Merchant Marine Academies, West Point, the Air Force Academy, and having worked with those youth, I have a pretty good understanding of that. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I would ask for the motion to be put on the floor if we could, so we can move on with the other business.
I would welcome it.
I move that the board direct the Planning and Zoning Commission to, now I forgot after we did all
Start the
this,
process.
to begin the process to remove zoning in the rural districts. Did I get that right?
You like that RV park?
Or right, RV parks in the rural district. There you go.
I would second the motion, Mr. Chairman, and ask for discussion. Because we have Mr. Linscott from the chairman or from the planning commission.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Mr. Linscott. There he is, the other one.
Matt Linscott, Sagal. You know, when we got ahead and back in 2019, what happened was, what kind of spurred was the impetus for the whole RV ordinance. We had a lot of people come to us because at that time, you were not allowed to stay in an RV more than X amount of days a year, then it had to be moved. We had a lot of people come to that workshop and say, no, we can't afford anything else. This is what we want to go ahead and live in. So we got ahead and drafted the RV ordinance at that time. You know, Mr. Bowman is correct about in, I believe it's table 12-333. But RV parks are not permitted in any zone. They're conditionally permitted in several of those zones that you were talking about. It's not a prohibited use in that ag, forest, and rural and those other zones that David mentioned. But they're not a prohibited use. And maybe we can get council to go ahead and explain the difference between conditionally approved versus prohibited versus permitted. So we are allowed to go ahead and add conditions on those RV parks that we did approve. LUPA, which is what gives us the power to go ahead and plan a zone, right in the beginnings under purpose, the very first article in there. The purpose of the act is to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the people of the state of Idaho as follows: to protect property rights while making accommodations for other necessary types of development, such as low-cost housing and mobile home parks. In 6508, underneath the housing component, says we are going ahead and plan for provisions of safe, sanitary, adequate housing, provision of low-cost conventional housing, the siting of manufactured housing and mobile homes in subdivisions and parks and on individual lots which are sufficient to maintain a competitive market for each of those housing types and to address the needs of the community. Our housing component was adopted in 2015. Most of our other components were adopted in 2005. The housing component was not adopted until 2015. We gone ahead and hired a company called BBC Consulting. Now, a lot of people were on the current comprehensive plan were saying, well, why don't we hire an independent consulting group on this? Well, this is one element that we did. But let me tell you what their recommendations were. And this is also what we got ahead and adopted in our housing fund was a lot of those recommendations. Housing type, single family dwellings, duplexes, multifamily housing, mobile homes, and recreational vehicles provide housing for permanent and seasonal residents in Bonner County. In our housing component, it went into the housing affordability and reference, what we refer to as the gap. The gap is the median household income versus the median household expense for housing. The government has said that no more than 30% of your gross income should go to housing, otherwise it's considered not affordable. We're working on the housing component. Matter of fact, tonight's planning meeting, we're going to be discussing more on the housing component. We got ahead and ran those figures. I took a look at them. That gap has only gotten worse. You know, when we have a median household income of around $51,000 a year now, which is up dramatically from 5 years ago, except for the problem is that median household costs on those households closed is over $500,000. It's very tough. That's the median sales price for Bonner County, not including the city incorporated areas. So that gap is only getting wider. The recommendations from, and they got ahead and included the Fair Housing Compliance Act in their recommendations. It says manufactured home parks should be allowed in residential zones. Lower single family parking standards should be considered. When we don't have a residential zone, what we have is rural residential zones. So that is our rural zone. So BBC recommended that we allow these parks in our rural zones. So in our housing component, Bonner County adopted this language. Bonner County encourages the development of safe, affordable housing. Bonner County should encourage a mix of residential and commercial uses where appropriate services and access to transportation are available. So we got ahead and looked at those RV parks, let's say the one that Dave referenced down in Blanchard. We got ahead and listened to the comments that the fire department had down there. They didn't want just one ingress and egress. And so they got ahead and developed that to have a flow through. So there's two ingress and egresses on that. They got ahead and had it approved with Panhandle Health Department for the amount of for the septic situations down there. And we had Bonner County Road and Bridge comment, and they didn't have any issues with transportation. So when all those boxes are checked off and a conditional use permit is a quasi judicial file, we're not allowed to use our own bias and our own feelings on this. We have to go ahead and look at statutes and code in our comprehensive plan when we go ahead and adopt this to make sure that conditional use permits are not in conflict with the comprehensive plan. So that is why, you know, we got ahead and approved those RV parks, because that's what.
Can I interrupt? Because I think we have to be not specific to that file, right, Bill?
Sure, I just encourage everybody. I mean, like, I can't tell anybody not to speak, but since it is under litigation, I would just encourage everyone to maybe speak in generalities as opposed to complicating that issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. And so my concern is if we go ahead and prohibit, because that's what we would be doing, is prohibiting RV parks in those zones that were mentioned. And if you can refresh my memory, we're going to go ahead and conditionally approve them or permit them in which zones?
It was to commission to remove RVs from the rural zones. And I guess I would ask you to, when you answer that, and when you read, you talked about the infrastructure. So what's the answer to the infrastructure not being present in a rural zone, but increasing the density? How does that serve the community that you're attracting to that area and the existing community then?
I guess, let me see, I'll try to answer that.
Yeah, just rural.
I understand your full question. So when we have those conditional use permits come up in front of us, and we have sent it out for agency review, Panhandle Health, Idaho Department of Environmental Quality will make comment on that. If it's more than 2,500 gallons per day of effluent, then it has to have an LSAS system. Otherwise, and that's regulated by IDEQ. Otherwise, if it's less than that, it's regulated by Panhandle Health District. So Panhandle Health District have gone ahead and done their tests out there. And if I'm not mistaken, on one RV park, they actually wanted more, but because of the size and the effluent, because on an RV, you're only looking, I believe it's 125 gallons per day per RV. It's not the same as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath residential home. I believe it's 125 to 150 gallons per day. So if you had, let's say 20, or even 19, you're going to be able to go ahead and
Use a different example. Using the Blanchard.
I'm not using that. That's just
Maybe 19 or 20.
But my comment is that Panhandle Health Department is involved on these RV parks. They have to sign off on those, and we have to have some kind of a preliminary perk test, and that is made as a conditional approval on those. I guess my question on this whole thing is, what's going to happen is, because are we in essence creating a de facto exclusion of these RV parks?
Well,
and that's what has me concerned, because it is a form of housing that a lot of people.
So it is a form of housing. And I think the question that I have heard from the community is there's a few. So the first one is it's rural, and there's the services in rural areas don't exist, especially in the unincorporated areas. So increasing the density in a rural area with multiple RV homes on one specific piece of land is a give to the person who's collecting the rent, but it removes that from the county, because for example, if I have on my 20 acres, 20 RV permanent dwellings, and I'm the one receiving $1,000 a month for rent on those homes, I'm still paying you the taxes from my lot. So there's not a contribution from the people that are living the long term there. And so if the infrastructure isn't there, we don't have, for example, our road issue, most of that's private roads in a lot of our areas. We don't have that contribution back into the pot. So that's why in the housing group, it talks about the infrastructure of the area. And so I don't think it's not an exclusion. And I think that verbiage is not an accurate representation. The request is that we not just look at it as, did all the ancillary agencies check off, which sometimes they do. It's what is the impact to the existing community of increasing the density with respect to the infrastructure that currently exists? And can you meet the needs currently of a community and then multiply it by 500 or 2,000 people? That's what the question is, because I do understand what you're saying, but that doesn't change that the infrastructure isn't there. There's no bus system. It's in a rural area, there's no bus system. You have a medical issue. You don't have services of 911 that is in certain ways that's faster, as if you were right across from the fairgrounds.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt here and call for a point of question, because we're not going to have a planning hearing during the business meeting, and I'm going to recognize Mr. Wilson.
My point was going to be, these are all very informative topics or discussions. I think if there's already been suggested that the motion is going to be approved to present this to the planning commission, I think that's in order to keep this meeting running. That's a great place to have that happen, just so we don't put the cart in front of the horse and start the debate. Like, allow the planning commission to do its job.
Mr. Wilson, clarifying question. I know how much you appreciate being put on the spot. In regards to the motion that is on the floor, and please correct me if I misquote you, Commissioner Williams. Is it appropriate to direct the commission from the board of commissioners about what the direction is, or would it be better to remand it to them to reconsider?
So you want to remand it because it hasn't actually been forwarded. So I think Commissioner Williams, the motion was to direct planning staff to essentially
visit
to present the item to the planning commission itself. So that's the way the process works. Typically, an ordinance is much more fleshed out. This is a simple. She's just saying move to direct planning staff to initiate the process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Linscott.
Thank you.
You want to rephrase the motion, or?
Okay, I move to direct the planning commission to present to the planning staff to present to the planning commissioners the issue of removing rural RV, or removing RVs from the rural zoning districts. RV campgrounds. Sorry.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have first and second.
Said.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Second item.
All
Commissioner
right.
Williams.
Human resources. So this was a point of contention last week. So I want to give some clarification. Kara Heikela is a 25-year employment law attorney. And so she has been tasked by this county for beyond this board. This isn't a new assignment for this particular attorney. So just briefly, she works throughout counties with various employers of various sizes. And her focus is employment law from the ADA, which is American Disabilities Act, Family Medical Leave Act, compliance, wage, hour issues, unemployment claims, contracts, handbook drafting, and policies. So that's within her scope of practice. And she has been doing that for this county beyond last week's request to update particular policies. So in the world of human resources and business, we have best practices. And for example, our EMS director or chief, he updates his policies annually because you have to be in compliance with not just the rules, but what's going on. So the fact that there is a law that exists from the federal government or the state government doesn't remove the need for a company, an organization, whether public or private, to actually have policies and procedures. In fact, when you get sued, one of the first things attorneys will ask you is, show me your policies regarding that issue. It is what happens. And so that's why you want a person that specializes in that area and a person who can update and they have the knowledge of what's happening in your particular climate. So I want to make sure we clearly understand what Kara's role is. In conjunction with that, our prosecutor's office already identified that it was reasonable and appropriate to task her with this assignment. So we have agreement from our attorney and with her presenting these policies. So in terms of some of the concerns that were addressed, these policies were set aside indefinitely with no clear understanding as to why they were set aside or when they would be reviewed. The Board of County Commissioners has a human resources department. As a county, the human resources director is supposed to manage human resources. That's the function of her job. And so in response, we followed up with Kara and our legal to give very clear information to the community about what took place. So I want to lead with first, Asia did not request that human resources update policies in spite of what's being communicated. This is a normal practice. And it is a good practice to have updated policies that as you move through business. So best practices around our policy practice and review would be every 2 to 3 years. Last week, our director of human resources explained that these are well beyond 2 and 3 years. So we should update them. That's reasonable. Best practice around citing law in the policy. The employment lawyer clearly stated to the county that this is not a best practice in human resources. The law is the law. And we are writing a policy. And the reason she gives for not doing it, and that she never recommends it, is because you don't want to confuse your policy with the law, because we're giving this out to our staff. Okay. So the other issue was workshopping, because I personally have never seen a company workshop all of its policies with the employees. The type of policies you'd workshop or like if you're going to change your PTO, vacation, sick time, and you want to get the buy-in of the people that work for you. But when it comes to the foundation policies of an organization, typically you have your C-suites, or in this case, probably your elected officials would sit down, they'd review policies, you make your update, you review it with law, and then you would roll it out to your staff. So that's actually an extra thing that we did in this case. Bonner County had some commissioners who they wanted workshops. Those workshops were completed. Those workshops didn't result in any additional questions. It's not necessarily best practices, but we did follow through with that. So one recommendation from Kara was that as we're updating our policies, that's actually attorney-client privilege because it is a document until we roll it out, that maybe we do that in our executive session. And so one of the things that keeps happening is we say we're going to follow our legal counsel, but when we get an opinion that we don't like, we are not following it and not explaining to the public how we're making this decision. In this particular case, we needed to update a grievance policy. It was recommended from legal that we have a whistleblower policy. This is not an opinion based on our particular climate, but what is happening in employment law across the state of Idaho. That does happen in human resources. When you start seeing things that are litigious, A company will say, I want to give very clear instruction to our staff because it's going to be the excuse we use when we get sued for that to say, wait, this is what we told you the process and procedure was. It is a defense mechanism also for the county. And so this was not an underhanded issue that took place. And it is my request that the board review its decision to not update based on our legal input, or to clearly tell us that we're not going to, because we spent our tax money with Kara to update these policies to not use them. And that is not reasonable, and that's not fiscal responsibility of taxpayer money. So if we're not going to approve or give any idea as to how we're going to update these policies, I recommend that the board who voted to not update the policies explain to the community, how do we ensure that we're protecting the interests of not just the employees, but of the people of Bonner County to not get sued because we are advertising now that our policies are outdated to the community and that we are indefinitely never going to address those issues. And I don't know that I think that's a recommended position to take from a government agency. So that is my issue with human resources, as well as a continued concern from community members and staff that this board continues to place human resources generically in executive session without explaining what we're doing here. And so some people have this feeling that the board is attempting to take over human resources. Some feel we're trying to fire human resources. Some say that we want to pull it under. So executive session, Title 74, Chapter 2, it's open meeting, and it comes back to a consistent problem with this board. We are only supposed to put very narrow items in executive session. It is not a running commentary so that we can talk about people. We are supposed to, in this case, if it is, where do we put human resources? That conversation is to happen in the public until we get to the point where there's a small item that is justifiably in executive session. It is not the whole conversation. We are creating an unhappy workplace within our own department by this consistent, and I see it again here, on executive session personnel. I can tell you, I reached out. I know that the elected official over our human resources department is not this board. It's actually the prosecutor's office. Not invited to this meeting, doesn't know what this is about. This is not being transparent. This is not ensuring that we're creating a good work environment for those people in the community or the very lengthy list of people we keep asking to come and work here. You do not attract people to work in dysfunction. So it is my request that this board discontinue this continued push and pull of human resources, be transparent on this issue, and allow human resources to update these policies. Last week, you had our attorney and another attorney say this was reasonable and necessary, and we ignore it, but we spent all of our money. That is not okay with me. So I would like that to be reviewed by this board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
Mr. Chairman, as I briefly alluded to earlier, the Bonner County Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual, which is, I brought down with me, which is right here. It's adopted by the Board of County Commissioners, and as such, I guess part of my question in regards to in the attorney-client relationship, if it is in regards to personnel policy, and it is the Board of County Commissioners who are responsible for personnel, it would be my understanding that we, in this case, now us, the three of us, that we would be the client in that relationship. And so, Mr. Wilson, could you provide any response to that? Am I correct, or who's the client and who's the?
I ask who holds the privilege, the attorney-client privilege?
In regards to policy, in this case for Bonner County, in regards to these, yes.
Yeah, I think that since the board is responsible for reviewing and adopting policies, then yes, you would be the client for purposes of providing that analysis. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So as I mentioned, I have spoken with the previous board. So my understanding is that the board is the client, but they didn't ask to hire an attorney for this process. So one of the things I'm looking at, as I was talking about in transparency, which I believe is a two-way street, in a variety of different ways. If the client is not aware that they are asking someone to engage and spend money, maybe I'm confused about how we're spending money in this county. And that's what I'm looking for. I am very comfortable, Commissioner Williams, addressing these policies. But having worked on policies in 2 different public service organizations, I can tell you, in my experience, it is exceedingly normal to talk with stakeholders, having been on multiple policy committees, that we talk with the people that are engaged and to hold workshops. It is not normal in my experience with public education in Idaho or with the military, where we would have meetings and we would discuss standard operating procedures to do so in executive session. And it does not make sense to me that if the Board of the Commissioners is the client, but we are not aware that we're the client, I'm just confused. So
I could give some clarity to that.
well,
So I'm not relying on my expertise. We hire a human resources director, and that is her job function. And so she is tasked with keeping policies up to date. This county has actually already contracted with an employment attorney, and that information was actually explained by Bill Wilson. He said he stood by her work. They have this discussion. And here's the point that this board often forgets is, in this case, the prosecutor told this board and the prior board that it was reasonable and necessary to use an employment lawyer. And so since that information was given, it was already known that was the practice of human resources. I'm not going to sit and learn all of what Mrs. Binkert has to know as a human resources director. That's her job function. What I'm seeing happen is, and I'm going to give an example, is in this case, you're caring about the attorney, yet when it came to Davalier, you signed a whole agreement without a discussion.
Okay, back to the point.
Right.
Back to the point.
So my point is that in this case, you received a legal recommendation from our prosecutor's office and an employment attorney and someone whose job. And so the question is, are we really caring about the policy, or are we more having an issue with human resources and that group, which leads to the consistent argument in the county that we are not being fair to human resources, because this is actually the cleanest decision to make. It's recommended, and we get to walk away and say, we got bad advice from an attorney if it was wrong. But in this case, we're arguing with an attorney. And let me ask the question, we didn't update grievance. What's our grievance process? It's outdated, it's antiquated. Why wouldn't we update it for the people that feel like they are not being represented by this board? This is more of a personal issue than a business function, because we wouldn't have this many discussions on policies. In most cases, she would just bring it to you, say, it's been reviewed by legal, it's recommended, you sign it, and we move on to important business of the county. Not, why did we hire that person?
I think I'm in agreement with you, Commissioner Williams, that we need to have these policies. I'm also going to stand firm and fast that we need to do it in sunlight, in the light of day. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that we have additional, I'm not sure what action you're looking for.
What does sunlight and the light of day mean? You called Commissioner McDonald to ask him what to do. This is the board. So give the board an answer. Give these people an answer how we update the policy. This is part of the problem. It's not transparent. These people are hired to update human resources. We should be actually sitting here celebrating the fact that our human resources was able to rally around people that had a need from human resources. Instead, we're arguing about something that is, what is your goal? Tell us, how do we get to update a policy that is more than 3 years old? Tell us that so we can work on that, so we can move forward. Just tell me that answer and I will do it after we leave. How do I update those policies?
I believe the motion last week was to table it and get a redlined addition so we can see what the original and what the change is. And we have not been provided that to this day. So until we see that, it is still tabled indefinitely.
All right.
So next item.
Good use of our tax money. All right, the next item, this is kind of funny, that's coming after this one, is I got a request from Spencer Hutchings, who's in the room, that we have a town hall so that members of the community cannot be reduced by 4 people a day, 3 minutes each, so that they could have access to ask questions, so that the meeting doesn't take as long. So I'm going to let him present his idea.
Good morning, fellow citizens and public servants.
What I would like to do is, or what I'd like to suggest is saving it for the record. Spencer Hutchings, no worries, no worries. Spencer Hutchings, for the record. What I would like to suggest, as Commissioner Bradshaw has said, this is the business meeting, right? So they're just here to do their business, and we're basically, the way he's acting and the way he's speaking to us, we're interrupting the county's business. And to a certain extent, I can see that. I can understand that a little bit. But that doesn't change the fact that we as citizens get to interact with these people, and we should get to interact with them on a public forum. We should be able to ask them questions. And when we're doing our little 3-minute public comment, we can't even ask them questions. They've said we can't ask questions or make accusations or disparage people or whatever. Well, I'm not for that. I'm for freedom of speech, and I'm for everybody getting to say what they want to say. If you want to be an ass, I guess you can do that on display for the public. And if these folks would like to answer your questions or make comments on your questions, I think we should be able to do that. I think as citizens of this county, we should be able to have an interaction with them. But I don't think this is necessarily the place for it. What I'm suggesting is that we have a completely separate meeting where the public comes out maybe once a month. I'm thinking maybe on a Saturday, and we can do it here, or we can do it at the fairgrounds, however big of a space we need for whoever wants to attend to show up. I think people should come to the door, show they're a Bonner County citizen. You want to say something, put your name on a little piece of paper, we'll throw it in a bucket, and we'll pick people at random until all the names are out of the bucket. If it takes all day, it takes all day. But I think people should be able to speak their mind, and we should be civil to each other. But I think during this period, people should be able to vent. Some people are obviously quite frustrated about some stuff, and I think you should be able to get it off your chest. And I think the commissioners, having been elected as public servants, should be able to listen to us, and they should be able to take that. And it could go off their water or go off their back like water on a duck, or they can respond. But we should get the opportunity to say something. I'll say it.
It should be in Zoom.
Actually, I think it should be. I think it should be recorded, and it should be saved permanently. I think I don't think Zoom would necessarily work in that large of a thing. If you can't make it to the meeting, perhaps you make a statement, have somebody read it for you or something. I don't know how.
A live feed.
Yeah, live feed. A live feed, definitely.
Move back to the order of agenda, please.
This is
on the agenda.
I understand that, Mr. Hutchings. However, engaging with members of the public at the business meeting kind of.
Well, this is the whole point of what I'm saying is you guys don't want to engage with us at a public meeting. So I'm suggesting a separate meeting held once a month where the commissioners show up and have somebody, maybe one other person take notes, and any of the other elected officials that want to show up should be there too. And we should engage with the public, and the public should participate in the government as the government was designed to operate.
And I think so I put it on the agenda, and I wanted to make sure Spencer, sorry, shortened it up, got to say his position, but we've watched Sheriff Wheeler do town halls that were not just well attended, but the community walks away feeling informed and that they have access to an elected official. And I think this would actually help if the full board participated, because it would allow the community to have their own meeting, and then it would actually make this a little bit shorter and focused on just the business, but allow that venting that we're not able to get done in this particular meeting. So I move that the Board of County Commissioners hold a town hall meeting with the entire board. I could arguably say monthly or bi-monthly, depending on how much stuff that we have to. So that the community, and it's a meeting for the community, so the community had its opportunity to speak to the commissioners on their issues and concerns. And I would add that sometimes there's an issue within a community that they would want a presentation as, and it's not necessarily the Board of Commissioners. They're just looking to flip the table essentially, and the people be in charge of a meeting where they're helping to direct and feel like they're represented. So I would make a motion that the Board of County Commissioners adopt having a town hall meeting, allowing the public to have the opportunity to discuss their issues and concerns with the full board after regular business hours and on a Saturday or after work hours on a Friday, to ensure that those who cannot participate with the daily business meeting, because it's at 9 a.m. Could participate. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Chairman, can we have some discussion?
I will have a discussion, and the part I would like to discuss is as great as that sounds, which one of y'all are willing to contribute to fund this, because it cost over $1,000 an hour for our IT, for Jesse, facilities, and people to be here after hours. So how's this get funded?
Well, if I may, Mr. Commissioner,
Yes,
it really doesn't matter how much it costs. We pay for this government, and if we elect to have this meeting, then whatever it costs is infinitesimal compared to what the benefit would be to the public.
except our budget is set once a year.
Well, then the budget will have to be adjusted. You guys manage to pay for lawsuits that you get into all the time, so maybe some of that money can be used for a public meeting.
But I actually would argue that it probably wouldn't have to really cost us. This is the county building. We could show up and we don't need to have necessarily, because they're not looking for even IT to come. But I know that there are community members that have an interest in it and would volunteer. I think that as a community, we could support them without using county budget. I think what they're asking for is the commitment of county commissioners' time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to amend Commissioner Williams, if I may. Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend Commissioner Williams' motion to set this to legal, to figure out what the requirements are. So that yes, I am. So then we can so that we can know what this is going to take, so we can do it legally for expenses. Do I need to restate my motion?
Yeah, I'd like you to say which attorney you should.
That's a two-way street. So, Mr. Chairman, I move to amend Commissioner Williams' motion, the original motion, to remand this to legal and figure out infrastructure before we go forward.
Do we have a second?
No, I liked my motion the way I said it.
Okay, I will step down from the chair and second.
Mr.
Commissioner
Rose,
Holman.
a question.
This is discussion between us, not the public. So we have a first and second roll call vote.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
No,
Commissioner Bradshaw.
Yes,
but we didn't vote on my motion though.
So I believe, Mr. Chairman, would the appropriate thing now to be to vote on the amended motion?
No.
Correct.
well, I think that was the amended
passed.
motion.
So
So
we need
so
to.
back to the original motion.
We need to vote on the original, yes.
Okay,
So we can make sure we're crossing our Ts and dotting our Is.
all right.
You're not willing to talk.
Okay,
Is that,
Do we have a second on the original motion?
I seconded, yes, Mr. Chairman.
All
roll
right,
call vote.
roll call vote.
Commissioner Ahmed.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes,
It's the amendment.
no.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. You guys first voted
Motion
on.
passes.
You second voted on.
Can we go back just for?
Yeah, you.
Okay,
So the original motion on the table was that Commissioner Williams made was a motion that the BOCC hold town hall meetings with the entire board monthly or bi-monthly after regular business hours on a Friday or on a Saturday. So that was the original motion, and I believe you seconded it, Commissioner Ahmed, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so can we
Madam
have a
Clerk.
vote on that original
On
motion?
the original motion?
Yeah, so it was moved by Commissioner Williams, it was seconded by Commissioner Ahmed. So can we have a vote on that original
On
motion?
the original,
Yeah.
thank you, Madam Clerk.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Ahmed,
No,
Commissioner Williams,
Yes,
Commissioner Bradshaw.
no,
So now, this second motion on the table was Commissioner Ahmed's motion, and he made a motion to amend Commissioner Williams' original motion to send this to legal for review, for logistics review. And I believe Commissioner Bradshaw seconded. So can we get a vote? Commissioner Ahmed,
yes,
Commissioner Williams,
no,
Commissioner Bradshaw.
yes,
but then I also amended and asked him to clarify what attorney he wants to send it to.
that'd be Uncle Bill over there.
Mr. Wilson.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay, next item, BOCC Commissioner Ahmed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, I'm looking to Bill to see if this is appropriate. I had brought forward an item previously, and I think today's meeting might demonstrate, but I would like to, and I don't know if I can, but I would like to see if I can move action item 2 in front of action item 1. Does that create any hardship? Because I have Mr. Elsasser on the line and he's on the East Coast working on a case. And I would like to try to honor his time if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That's fine. I don't think it creates a big problem.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The record. Mr. Chairman, there's been a lot that goes on in our meetings. Some take longer than others. A couple of weeks ago, I had brought forth a motion, which was not signed, to engage Davalier Law in some training for some items that would be for boards. That motion has been taken away. I was contacted by some concerned residents of Bonner County, longtime residents, and they had similar concerns as Commissioner Williams in regards to Davalier Law. Until January 9th of this year, I had never in my life spent so much weekly time with attorneys. And in the preceding 9 weeks, I have spent more and more and more time with attorneys. Doing things in a republic according to the law is exceedingly important, and trying to avoid unnecessary lawsuits is important. I was contacted by Mr. Ford Elsasser, and he asked if I would come and speak with him. I do not know Ford well. I've spoken to him in regards to some Lakes Commission stuff, and Ford is an accomplished attorney, and he is on the line. But Ford brought forth something that I presented in executive session. And as there has been so much discussion about transparency, I feel it's appropriate to bring forward so that the public can know what was referenced and honored or offered, and to determine whether or not it would be in the best interest of Bonner County to take advantage of this offer. And here's the offer, and I will read it, and then I would ask for Mr. Elsasser, who's online, to speak to what he's offering. And he could better speak to his experience as a lawyer. And really what we're talking about is auditing and trying to build trust, because I think there might be a little bit of a deficit in regards to what we're doing. So here's what I received from Mr. Elsasser. Ford Elsasser will be retained by Bonner County for a term of 90 days or upon completion of this engagement for the purpose of providing independent legal advices to the following matters. Advice on the appropriate conduct of regular and special meetings. A review of the current status and conduct of all current civil lawsuits, and to advise the Board of County Commissioners on a very temporary basis. To review the status of all current retentions of outside counsel to county and offer advice. To review all liability insurance and resolve any issues that would prevent the county from returning to ICRIMP if the county so chose. The fee structure, pro bono. And the retention may be terminated by Bonner County at any time on 10 days notice. And with that, if I could, I'd like to offer Mr. Elsasser the opportunity to make comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Elsasser, you have the floor. Can you hear?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can. Get a little closer to the mic if you could.
All right, I'll try. I'll speak as loud as I can, but here, yes, well, thank you. And the only thing I would add to what Luke has just stated is, I think the first part about advice on the conduct of meetings, that I don't know that that's really as relevant anymore, because it seems like you all are dealing with that differently. But I think that what I see as the primary benefit to the county is that I think most people know about my experience, but you wouldn't necessarily know that I've spent almost 35 years evaluating the retention of legal counsel and being asked to comment on their attorney's fees and so forth in my capacity as a government appointed bankruptcy trustee. And I've been involved with all of the major civil litigation firms in the state. And I think that I would be able to provide some good input for you all as commissioners to make decisions on with regard to the civil litigation where you are not represented by the civil deputies of the prosecutor's office. In other words, where you have outside law firms representing you and you don't have ICRIMP and you're paying substantial amount of outside legal fees, it would seem to make sense to review and evaluate what you have and where they are. And obviously, any such advice is simply that. No one's required to take that advice or even listen to that advice, but I think it would provide real value to the commissioners to have an understanding of what is the exposure to the taxpayers of all the civil litigation that is going on with the county, and where the county is represented by outside law firms as opposed to Mr. Marshall and his deputies, which is not the subject of what my proposal is. And I think it's otherwise pretty self-explanatory. I would be happy to assist. I'm at a stage in my practice now where I'm not taking on new cases. I'm wrapping up existing cases. And so I have the time to devote to it. Bonner County family and my friends, and I want to be able to provide some benefit to the county in return. So that's my proposal, and I'd welcome any questions. I do have a somewhat of a time constraint here, but I welcome any questions that anyone had with regard to it. But that's my proposal. And like I say, the first item with regard to advice as to the conduct of meetings, I think that's more or less maybe moot now. But as far as the remainder of what my proposal is, it's really to look at outside counsel and the outside litigation that you're involved in, and hopefully meet the ultimate goal, which is you've got to get back into ICRIMP. I'm sorry, I'll just say it right out there. It's something that very much needs to be done. I don't know how long it will take, and I don't know what the cost will be, but I think this evaluation will help you make your ultimate decisions on where you go forward. It seemed to me that all the litigation the county's involved in was apparent for everyone who ran last year, and I think that my services can benefit. I don't have any interest in the county's legal work. I don't have any, or from either me or my law firm. This is simply an independent evaluation of where you are with civil litigation. And if you're right where you should be, then that's what I'll say. And if you're not, I'll just give you my best judgment based on 44 years of practice. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and commissioners. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Okay. You have a motion or
Wait.
Mr. Rosedale?
So first of all, thank you, Mr. Assessor, for your offer and your outstanding service to the community. I appreciate that. I would want to say, though, we have an elected prosecutor who is phenomenal. He does a great job. Part of the reason why we have these outside, because we're not. I agree with Mr. Assessor that going back to ICRIMP would be a fantastic idea. But we have so many different cases that our county is litigating, and therefore out the proper attorney for each individual case. If we go back to ICRIMP, that would be, that would save the county a lot of money. It would save this board, all three of you, a bunch of heartaches, because I know you each have different opinions on things, as you should. I think it's good that you have different things. But the fact is, there's debate on which attorney to use for what. And I think going back to ICRIMP would be huge. And I think we have a phenomenal county attorney. And if he could focus on the things that normally county's attorney focus on, and give the stuff that normally ICRIM handles for counties, I think that would be a good move. But I think Louis does a great job. And I think he's the one you should talk to, especially when it comes to private information about ongoing litigation. We shouldn't be actually even handing those subject matters out to even a pro bono attorney like Ford Assessor. It just stay right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's worth mentioning for the record that our prosecutor was not in support of it, not because of an issue with Mr. Ford. It was a fantastic offer and appreciated.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, it shows the fabric of our community, but it had to do, part of our problem in this county before this board and on this board is shopping outside of our prosecutor's office, but that he is our go-to. We have already paid for Louis Marshall and for the people that are working underneath him. He should be our first right of review. And in this particular case, he identified essentially those same issues. It's county information. We don't have a system that allows us to do something like that. And part of it is, instead of first going to Davalier or any other agency, we should be asking Louis Marshall for, do we have a need to go to a different attorney, as was recommended with Human Resources when they said yes. When they say no, we need to say no and not put our money in somebody else's pocket. There are definite cases where we have to turf them to California. That is an airport attorney. That is a very specific line of business that the county has identified because we have airports that we need to use. And even when we're using somebody like Davalier, at the end of the day, they're also calling that attorney that's in California. And that's what Lewis's office is navigating for us. And we need to trust him because these people trusted him when they elected him. We shouldn't be circumventing other elected officials. We should be doing the stay in your lane thing. If Marshall says, I would accept that, this is what I would draw up, that's for him to do, not for us to dictate from this board.
And again, Mr. Assessor, I have nothing but the highest respect for Mr. Assessor.
I mean, it was a fantastic offer, but
And nothing but the
it's
highest
Lewis.
for our civil prosecutor as well.
Well, if I could answer your question, Commissioner Williams, I completely agree with you and Clerk Rosendale on Mr. Marshall. That's exactly my point. It's nothing to do with Mr. Marshall and the fine work he does as county prosecutor, including the work that his office does on civil deputies. What I'm talking about is your existing litigation that started before this group of commissioners took office, that is contracted to outside counsel. And I think I could provide particularly good insight given my experience level, but nothing about this is a reflection of the county prosecutor's office whatsoever, or the Davalier law firm who I've worked closely with in the past and have any conflict with. It simply to provide independent judgment as to the outside litigation firms that this to represent the county in civil litigation that is costing the county money over and above the county prosecutor's budget, including the budget for their civil deputies. So that's the purpose of this, and not in any way to reflect upon the work of the county prosecutor, either past, present, or future, which I think is past and present is certainly exceptional, but rather to provide judgment given the fact that the county's mired in a lot of civil litigation with outside counsel. And that's my proposal, and be happy to do it if the commissioners are interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my one comment would be that none of the three of us on this board have the authority to hire outside counsel without going through Louis Marshall, our prosecuting attorney. And so for me, I would go by his recommendation on this and that alone for me. At this time, I'll entertain whatever motion is going to be out there.
Mr. Chairman, I move to engage Ford Sasser for a term of no more than 90 days or completion of engagement for the purpose of providing independent legal advice.
Have a second?
Well, I would like to actually give, since our prosecutor attorney is here, I think it's reasonable for the public to hear his position on this because he was asked and it was presented by, sorry, you shouldn't have come late, Louis. Do you want to give your response on this particular issue? Because Commissioner Bradshaw made a statement that he wanted to follow the recommendation and the people should hear the recommendation of our prosecutor.
So a couple of things.
Thanks for having me on your shirt. That's cool. Oh,
Yeah, it could be steep, I guess. A couple things, I'm in favor of ICRIM too. There's some issues there. I was just asking Michael what our last premium was before we left ICRIM. He didn't remember. I don't remember, but I think it was $750,000 million, somewhere around there. Our premium is going to be higher than that. So let's not kid ourselves that just if we go back to ICRIM that everything's going to be great and we're not going to be writing a big check. We're going to be writing a big check.
really
Second,
big.
a really big check. That being said, I'm for going back to ICRIM. I've made that very, very clear to you guys. I think ICRIM handles liability insurance. Report is not liability. We found that out in the civil case,
Right.
the biggest case, one of the biggest cases in history of county government in Idaho, not covered by ICRIM because it was not a tort. So it's not going to be some sort of panacea that's going to make everything great. We're still going to have to spend a lot of money. I'm in favor if board work with Mr. Wilson and myself and look at this. If the board wants to go ahead and go aside from me, there's a process that you have to do. I gave you the Attorney General's opinion from about 30 years ago. I believe that's still good law. You'd have to find there's a necessity. I would challenge that there's a necessity. I don't think there is. But I would be happy to work with Mr. Elsesser. I've known Ford for decades. I sat on the airport board with Ford. I know he's a very skilled attorney. So is Mr. Wilson. We have a lot of experience in this thing, but yeah, I think that Bill and I would be happy to sit down with him and look at some of our cases.
But would you agree that this is not a decision for the board? That's for your office to decide?
I agree with you.
Okay.
Commissioner Lynch. I
Thank
think
you.
that is something, but I'm just pledging that I would be
Yeah.
willing to do that.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
I agree
you.
with that.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Elsesser.
Thank you.
So the original motion was there a second?
No.
No, motion dies. Okay, next item.
Jason,
Would be Commissioner Ahmet for the BOCC.
good morning out in YouTube land, Commissioner Luke Ahmet. When the taxpayers sent us to the IAC. I have to have power for. Thank you, Jason. When the taxpayers sent many of your elected officials to the IAC legislative session in January, there were a number of us who received this training. I am not Jim McNall. Jim McNall was the commissioner for 12 years and then he proceeded to work for ICRIM. After I attended this training, my understanding was dramatically improved into what is the expectation, more importantly to me, what is the responsibility that I hold as a commissioner in safeguarding the taxpayer dollars and how do we potentially avoid litigation? And Jim McNall is about my height, but he is a much smoother presenter than I am, so I apologize for that. All right. So in regards to boards, committees, so on and so forth, there are different types. There are statutory, advisory ongoing, advisory temporary, and advisory to other than the BOCC. Bonner County has 10. And they include such as planning and zoning. Bonner County has 10 of these boards and councils. The BOCC appointed boards are the Airport Advisory Board, the EMS Advisory Council, the Natural Resources Committee, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and the Waterways Advisory Board. Our statutory appointed ones are the Board of Community Guardian, the Fair Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, the Pre-Slate Groomers Advisory Board, and the Snowmobile East Advisory Board. So here's state law that explains what a governing body is. And this is according to 74-202. Members of any public agency which consists of 2 or more members with the authority to make decisions for or recommendations to a public agency regarding any matter. So in this case, a board could also be something that was a group of elected officials that would make advice that may impact the budget. So if there was to be a committee of elected officials that came together with the intent of advising something to the Board of Commissioners that involves the expenditure of public funds, we, the commissioners, are responsible to make sure that we are in compliance with the law. Here are some examples, and I've spoken of the 10 that Bonner County currently has. We also have some additional historical boards, and during budget season, which is fast approaching, which is a concern of mine because we are a balanced budget county and we only have so much money that we ask from our taxpayers. It's important that we are good stewards of that taxpayer dollar. Now, who we populate on a board matters, and especially we have been receiving lots of interest in the Fair Board, which is fantastic. And as you can see by today's group and the last couple of meetings, we've had a lot of interest in our meetings, which is good. But there are rules and limitations that we need to be aware of. By the way, this remains Mr. McNall's presentation, not mine. So there are statutory limitations, state law mandates, how as a subcommittee or a subunit of the state, we will operate. It is not up to the Board of Commissioners to make state law out of whole cloth. We simply do not have that authority. We need to select those who can get along. Sometimes that can be challenging, but strong personalities leads to good decisions. We need to know what conflicts there are, because if you recuse yourself on certain boards, you can't vote. And when you don't have a quorum, you cannot make decisions, and that creates problems. Beware of those who want on a board. Why do people want to serve? Do we have agendas, and how does that work with our boards and committees and commissions serving the purpose for which they were created? And who are the constituents? In regards to the Fair Board, it is all of Bonner County. I have shown many a pig at the fair, and I hope that there are many people that will do so afterwards. So what are the goals for our boards, commissions, and committees? And the last one I think is incredibly valuable. Cooperation is usually the key to success. Training. And this is what led to my decision previously. Training. Appointees of all boards, commissions, they are public officials. And as such, they need training on budget and other constraints. Public records, I'll share this with you. They need to be aware of open meeting laws. What records are available? What records can be excluded from the public? They also need to be staffed. What are we asking of our committees? This is very important to me. Occasionally, there has been known to be a contentious meeting in Bonner County, whether it be planning, zoning, Fair Board. And what are we asking these people who volunteer their time, somewhat thanklessly at times, and really what they're looking for is they want there to be waffle cones, elephant ears, and we're looking for ice cream, and I say God bless them. So, liability, this is a big deal. Now, as a public official in Idaho, it is unlikely that individual members of a board will accept liability. However, this body right here, no matter what we do, we are liable. And the consequence of that is that it affects our ability to provide services that we are statutorily obligated to provide, such as road and bridge, the sheriff, airports, veteran services. And as Chairman Bradshaw has stated, we are budgetarily confined. We have fiscal realities. So as long as within the course and scope of a committee, commission, or board's purpose, they're okay. But a board needs training. As a general rule, no governing body should be turned loose without staffing. Well, who is going to pay for that staffing? There has been, we have to have minutes. We have to comply with these open meeting laws. And many of these volunteers, they're volunteering and they don't have the prerequisite experience or time to be able to comply with these laws. But it does not remove the board's responsibility to be able to provide the public with those records. There are some exceptions, and that is in regards to the Board of Community Guardians and possible recycle committees. The Board of Community Guardians deals with very personal issues, and that is not something that is in the purview of the general public, very similar to much of our executive sessions. So, in regards to reporting requirements, what the public can see so that they know what these people, these volunteers are doing, and also how we are expending your taxpayer dollars. The minutes, reports from the staff person, reports from the chairman or chairwoman. They may have a liaison, but depending on the boards and the makeup, there's very different statutory obligations. For example, the Airport Advisory Board, we must hire outside counsel. Why? Because the FAA demands it. And if we want to accept those FAA funds, of which we are currently on the hook in the millions of dollars, we have to comply. And Bonner County is unique in that we have two airports. We are the second highest grossing airport in the state of Idaho, which is mind-boggling. The economic driver and impact of that board and that airport impacts the food that is on people's families. Communication should be two ways. Here comes something that is important, and this goes back to CYA. What is harder than terminating an employee? Terminating a volunteer. Some of the statutes create a right in the appointed position. That is where we consult with our legal, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Marshall. Why do we come to these meetings? And specifically, there are different types of meetings. You have regular meetings, you have workshops, you have special meetings. As has been discussed, each of these meetings requires staffing and noticing. For the public's awareness, noticing also has very particular rules. We are unable, as the Board of County Commissioners, to just throw out a notice via smoke signals that we are going to have a meeting. We must follow state law. And in order for us to do so, every time we notice costs us money. And it's not a small amount of money when you consider the amount of meetings and notices that we must provide. So, these meetings should enable the action by the governing boards to carry out their statutory obligations or the obligations as intended by the Board of County Commissioners, to hear from the members of the public, to explain why local government acts, considers acting, or chooses not to act. Here are some very basics on open meeting law, and there is going to be a presentation. All meetings that involve county resources that do not involve personally identifiable information that is precluded from law is subject to Idaho's open meeting law. And it governs all meetings at which a quorum will be present to engage in deliberations, which is why later we are going to have an executive session so we can discuss to try to get a board into alignment with the statutory obligations of the state, but we are also going to do so in a manner that honors those personal issues of private citizens.
Commissioner Ahmet,
Yes, sir.
on that first point there in the parentheses, beware of subcommittees / workshops. Because I've been approached by several. How come you don't do little workshops and stuff? And that is exactly why right there. Because we have to do all that you covered before that. I can't just say, hey, I'm going to meet at the Sagal Community Center and do a workshop with the community. I can do that, but there's a whole lot of compliance I just skipped over.
Especially, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Is that as a board, as a member of the board of three, so just speaking for the Board of County Commissioners, I can hold a meeting, and I hold it at Doves. I like Doves. I've liked it for 30 years, 40 years. My kids like it more than I do now. I still like Doves. But I cannot represent myself as the Board of Commissioners. I am a 1/3 vote. Individually, I have this much authority. But I also have 100% capacity to create a dilemma where Mr. Wilson or Mr. Marshall will have to spend time correcting my excesses if I say the board will do this. I simply do not have that authority statutorily provided to me. There's other things that we need to be aware of. Notice, agenda minutes, and a non-discriminatory place to meet. And this creates some challenges. Churches are not a good place to meet because not everybody has the same belief. They're great. I'm there every Sunday. However, I believe that not all of you attend the same place of worship that I do, and that is America. There's also ADA requirements, accessibility and accommodation for those with special needs. So if you choose to have a meeting on the top of Schweitzer, not everybody can make it. And now we have created an expense to, ultimately, it is the county, and there is a reduction of services that we are going to have to cure. What is a meeting? This is a big deal. A meeting is the convening of a governing body of a public agency to make a decision or to deliberate toward a decision on any matter. However, and this is exceedingly important, as I have spoken with Prosecutor Marshall and his deputy, it does not include ministerial or administrative actions necessary to carry out a decision previously adopted in a meeting held in compliance. There are simply certain tasks that need to be done in an administrative or ministerial fashion. If we were to require all of the members of the body to hold open meetings at all times, we would grow government to such a point that we would hold a lot of meetings and get nothing accomplished. Meetings need to be effective, organized, purposeful, respectful. The expectations need to be understood, both of the participants, the executive officers, and their staff. The public also needs to understand the expectation. What are the rules? How do we manage that? With the entire point being to accomplish the purpose of that meeting. Here's an example. Meeting rules.
And those are just examples.
I
don't. You can make them longer, shorter, adopt them, not adopt them.
Each speaker will be limited, or could be may, could be shall. It is up to each individual commission and committee, or in certain cases, the board to provide that. And it also is dependent upon the type of a meeting. Different meetings have different purposes which provide for different rules. The commission may not hear or take testimony regarding any planning or zoning matter that is before the county or is known to be a likely application. I have discovered to my dismay that there are more people that are willing to speak to me about planning and zoning matters of which I may or may not know much about, but I do know that if I discuss them, that I am jeopardizing and exposing our county to financial liability. Issues regarding the performance of county employees constitute matters that must be discussed only in executive session. I'd like to repeat that. Issues regarding the performance of county employees constitute matters that must, it's not may, it is must be discussed only in executive session and are not appropriate in the public portion of the meeting. Matters that have been previously.
That would include HR matters, wouldn't it?
It may, Mr. Chairman, it may not. It depends upon the.
Since that has to do with employees only.
It may or may not, Mr. Chairman. Matters that have been previously heard and decided by the commission may be determined. Be not appropriate for the public comment period, if I may repeat that. Matters that have been previously heard and decided by the commission may be determined to be not appropriate for the public comment period. Citizens may use this time to request that items be placed on future agendas for further discussion. Agendas. This too is a requirement. It also can be an expense. An agenda is required for each meeting, posted the same, posted 48 hours, and only good faith amendments. We cannot, according to state law, willy-nilly out of thin air create reasons to not have something agendized. Motion and vote are required for amendments made within 48 hours of or during the meeting to include a good faith reason, which is why this morning I contacted Mr. Wilson and I started with the CYA, which is consult your attorney. Conduct of the meetings, who and how we act. Who sets the agenda? How is it set? The chairman normally conducts. Allow or encourage participants to discuss. And I have been at fault for this one. With my muddled motions at times, motions need to be succinct, clear, comprehensive. How we amend motion matters. And our votes, why? Because they are public records and they deal with the expenditure of public funds. What is the role of the chairman? This is exceedingly important, and it can be different according to the board, commission, or committee. They conduct the meeting and they retain rights to discuss and vote, controls public input when is allowed. The role of the chairman is to control public input when it is allowed. Ideally, the chairman will keep the discussion to the agenda item, and that is so that the purposes of that meeting will be honored. The chairman is responsible to prohibit personal attacks and discussions of issues not before the board. There are roles for the staff, and this goes back to that financial statutory obligation that our board has. We have a financial obligation to make certain that our boards, committees, and commissions are successful. And some of that is by providing staffing, which costs the taxpayer money. It is to prepare and disseminate prepare and disseminate information, take minutes to record. This meeting is being recorded and is also a part of the public record. And we have had a couple of people, to include someone testifying from the East Coast, which you have to say is pretty darn neat. To answer questions, may provide regular reports in your area or whatever the board determines, which is appropriate within their statutory or purpose meeting of that board, commission, or committee. So there has been work done by the county in regards to improving some of our committees, boards, and commissions. That work requires public resources, which is financial, job descriptions, sideboards written in person, which is why in regards to certain openings, we try to keep to a process. We do not want to be exposing ourselves to further tort or liability. To meet with these boards, commissions, or committees periodically to make certain they have staff, which goes back to our financial obligation. To consider when the term ends, and this is when we found out January is probably the worst time, which is when fair boards and only fair boards term ends, which we are working to adjust. And finally, there needs to be training on ethics, meetings, and records. That is the responsibility of the Board of Commissioners to make sure that our boards commissions and committees are successful. And if we don't, we are asking these citizens of our county to step forward and give of their time, oftentimes thanklessly, without the tools to be effective. So here are some common questions. If the committee members are all to be at a conference, should I post as a meeting? Well, many of us went to the IAC. What you do, this goes back to ethics. We don't talk about things that are going to be voted on because it's unethical. What if a citizen calls each member individually? It depends. As a commissioner, I have legislative, executive, and quasi-judicial roles. There are times when it is appropriate for me to talk to individual members of the public in a legislative fashion. However, if it is a land use issue and I am speaking with someone about that file, I could be breaking ex parte communication and I am exposing the county to risk. And I am also creating an unjust situation where landowners' private property rights could be violated. Can I violate the open meeting rules by emailing fellow members? Yes, you can. You need to be careful. Abstention. It depends if there is a conflict. This goes back to CYA. Consult your attorney. I have found more and more, and maybe to our attorney's chagrin, that I am consulting them more than I would like. But I have a feeling that it is cheaper for me to consult before rather than after. Contracts. And this is a big deal for the Board of Commissioners because I believe that this, what the Board of Commissioners does, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We should be modeling. We are the ones who have the ability to authorize contracts. And that was the ICRIMP presentation by Jim McNall. And ICRIMP, as there's been multiple references to it, stands for the Idaho County Risk Management Program. We are currently self-insured. I'm not going to make a statement on the record about whether I am in support or opposed. I will tell you, I am in support of listening to the presentations and making the best decision that I can make with the information presented. I wanted to present this both to the public and to the commission so that there could be an understanding of why I personally did choose to work with Davalier. And I'll give you a further example. Davalier Law, in regards to their billing statements, are the absolute most clear. And that is important to me as a taxpayer. I know what they are billing and where that money is going. And I greatly appreciate that. Additionally, the money that is spent on those individuals stays in Bonner County and it feeds Bonner County families. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Thank you.
That was my presentation.
Okay, and now you got one more issue to.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Jason, am I back? Thank you, Jason.
You have another presentation because my head's in the center, so I'll sit up there.
Oh, no, I think Jason's gonna fix it and go back to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, because if I help fix it, it'll probably be broke forever.
No, that's why I took the skills, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. BOCC number 3.
All right, Mr. Chairman. This is in regards to the scope of work for Sewell and Associates related to the Fairgrounds boundary line adjustment. The firm of James Sewell and Associates has already been retained to assist Bonner County with the construction and permitting of a campground near the Bonner County Fairgrounds. Due to a previously unforeseen circumstance, Bonner County requires additional work on the site, specifically the platting of the entire fairgrounds property itself, as well as the county-owned property to the south. This work is required before the county can execute a boundary line adjustment, expanding the fairgrounds property to encapsulate the site of the campground, which currently straddles the boundary line between the fairgrounds and a vacant parcel to the south. And I am prepared to make a motion.
I would like a discussion on this issue. So on Thursday, I was not here. I was at my Old Town meeting and the agenda item said grant/fairgrounds. And I specifically asked, what was this discussion about? And it was about the grant. During this particular meeting, which I listened to because it was recorded, you have our prosecutor's office explaining that the discussion of boundary line adjustment was not placed on the agenda. You can hear Commissioner Almont clearly state to council that he emailed Fair Board members to tell them they should come to the meeting. That's not how we do this type of meeting. So I hold that this is not appropriate to discuss right now. It wasn't noticed properly. We didn't have people very clearly understanding what this attempt was. And Title 74, Transparent and Ethical Government, Chapter 2, regarding open meetings, 74-206A, negotiations in open sessions, subsection 1. All negotiations between a governing body and a labor organization shall be an open session and shall be available for the public to attend. This requirement also applies to negotiations between the governing bodies, designated representatives and representatives of labor organizations. This requirement shall also apply to the meetings with any labor negotiation arbiters, fact finders, mediators, or similar labor dispute meeting facilitators when meeting with both parties to the negotiation at the same time, provided, however, a governing body or its designated representatives may hold an executive session for the specific purpose of deliberating, A, receiving is B, all documentation exchange, and it goes into very good detail. None of this occurred on Thursday. This was a meeting, and when you hear the tape, Commissioner Omot clearly states, I'll make the motion with our counsel saying, but this is not what the topic is. It's about the grant. Just because we're talking about the fairgrounds and the grant, when you talk about boundary line adjustments and moving the ownership of that piece of land to the fairgrounds from where it currently sits, that is its own agenda item. So it is disingenuous to say that we basically already hired them. This is just a small thing. There are a lot of legal implications that our counsel gave during this meeting that were disregarded with a comment that said, I do not want to wait. I want to move forward. This is our issue. And as a community, it should have been properly noticed, the correct people invited, and the mere statement of having sent email to Fair Board members shows that it was not properly noticed. This is exactly a review of what happened with this ice rink. We cannot revisit that. And as we look to caring about litigation costs and attorneys, transparency, community involvement, this is not appropriate for us to be making a decision, because the request here is a decision to start that process with a dollar amount attached to it. We don't have a recommendation from our council to do this, which brings back to the consistent problem of this board is we say we'll listen, but we ultimately seem that we are really not committed to that. And it is further disturbing to me that we would not invite the sheriff when this has been a point of contention, not for this board, but for years. And so in order to avoid and mitigate potential litigation, if this moves forward because of a majority vote, it is clear that we are accepting risks instead of mitigating risk. And that responsibility will lie with the two commissioners that push this forward. Because I guarantee you, sheriff isn't going to walk away from this. It's going straight to the attorney general. This was not noticed. I specifically asked why this was on the meeting. And I was told it was specifically only about some grant, not a boundary line adjustment. I didn't get to ask questions of this engineering firm. There was no question from the sheriff or interested parties. There was no Fair Board members. And we had legal representation saying, please don't move forward with this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Wasn't Bill in that meeting?
Bill was at that meeting, and we can have discussion.
Bill witnessed that whole meeting?
And it's on the record, yes.
And
Mr.
that was
Chairman.
about the grant and how to move forward with the grant?
Which has been accepted. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
So did either of you say he recommended it? Because you just said he was there. So someone clearly say Bill said move forward. Did he say that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Make the motion.
Mr. Chairman. I'm still prepared to make my motion. Mr. Chairman, based on the information before us, I move to approve additional work by Sewell and Associates at the Bonner County Fairground and adjacent property, including survey work to plat same in amount not to exceed $25,000.
Do we have a second? I will step down from the chair and second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Omit,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
No, this is not in line with the way in which Bonner County conducts business. This is in disregard to an elected official. This is against the recommendation of our attorney, Bill Wilson. And for a person who says that you will indefinitely suspend a recommended legal document, how is it that we can move forward with a document that has been stated to not actually move forward because of the legal implications? So for those reasons, I say no.
Yes. Commissioner Bradfeld.
Yes. Okay, it is 11:54. We will adjourn this meeting. We will go into recess for 10 minutes and we will go into executive session up